The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Subspace exists as a malleable dimension beneath normal spacetime, allowing faster-than-light travel through carefully calculated warp fields. Anomalies occur, certainly: spatial distortions, temporal rifts, even the occasional intersection with parallel quantum realities. But what happens when the impossible doesn't simply appear, but crashes through the barriers between universes with 16.5 meters of Gundanium alloy, and the determination of a pilot who never learned to surrender? The USS Enterprise D was conducting a routine survey of the Caleb sector, charting subspace fluctuations near an uncharted nebula approximately 40 light-years from the Romulan neutral zone. Captain Jean-Luc Picard sat in his command chair, reviewing geological data from the previous planetary survey, when Lieutenant Worf's voice cut through the bridge's steady operational hum. "Captain, sensors are detecting a massive subspace distortion, bearing 27 Mark IV. Energy readings are unprecedented." The Klingon security officer's fingers moved across his tactical console with practiced efficiency. "The anomaly is expanding rapidly." Picard rose from his chair, tugging his uniform jacket into place, a habitual gesture before moments of uncertainty. On screen, the main view screen shimmered, replacing the star field with an image of roiling space. What began as a pinpoint of distorted light expanded into a churning vortex of blue-white energy, tendrils of subspace radiation arcing outward like grasping fingers. The phenomenon defied easy classification. Not quite a wormhole, not precisely a spatial rift, but something that borrowed characteristics from both. Fascinating. Commander Data observed from the operations station, his positronic brain processing sensor information faster than the console could display it. "The anomaly exhibits properties of both a subspace inversion and a dimensional fracture. I am detecting exotic particles that do not correspond to any known element in Federation databases." "Distance?" Picard asked, his tone measured but alert. 30,000 kilometers and closing," Worf reported. "The phenomenon is moving toward us at—" He paused, checking his readings twice. "Captain, something is coming through." The vortex pulsed, its edges contracting inward as if reality itself were giving birth. Then, in a cascade of impossible light and shrieking spatial distortion that sent sensor readings spinning into chaos, something emerged. It stood 16.5 meters tall, a humanoid war machine of elegant brutality. Its armor gleamed with an otherworldly bronze-gold sheen, accented with deep blue and white panels that suggested both artistry and function. The mobile suit's head featured a single mono-eye sensor that swept the surrounding space with an alien awareness. Shoulder-mounted weapon pods bristled with armaments, while both hands gripped curved, blade-like implements that radiated residual heat signatures. The machine hung motionless in space for a heartbeat, its thrusters dark, before they flared to life with controlled bursts that stabilized its position. "Red alert," Picard commanded. Klaxons wailed as the bridge lighting shifted to crimson. "Shields up." "Mr. Worf, analysis." "Unknown vessel, Captain. Configuration unlike anything in Starfleet databases, not Klingon, Romulan, Cardassian, or any known species." Worf's voice carried grudging respect. "Scanning. The whole composition is resisting our sensors. What little data I'm receiving suggests an incredibly dense alloy. Weapons hot, detecting directed energy capabilities and what appear to be projectile launchers. 15.8 meters in height," Data added, his golden eyes fixed on the view screen. "Bipedal configuration with articulated limbs suggests a piloted vehicle rather than an autonomous vessel. Power signature indicates an active fusion reactor, though the specific design principles are unfamiliar. Captain, this vessel appears to be designed for atmospheric and space combat." Counselor Deanna Troi leaned forward in her seat beside the captain, her empathic senses reaching toward the impossible machine. Her eyes widened. "Captain, I'm sensing someone inside." Confusion, fear, but also gentleness? The emotional signature is almost overwhelmingly compassionate, yet there's a core of absolute determination beneath it. Inside Gundam Sandrock's cramped cockpit, Quatre Raberba Winner's hands moved across unfamiliar controls with desperate efficiency. Warning indicators flashed across his panoramic monitor. Systems recalibrating, sensors reporting impossible data, communications arrays detecting frequencies his mobile suit had never been designed to interpret. The 17-year-old pilot's platinum blonde hair was matted with sweat, his normally kind blue-green eyes wide with a mixture of shock and tactical assessment. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of Sandrock's systems. "Zero's system didn't predict this. The other Gundams, the colonies. Did the battle damage the dimensional barrier somehow?" His empathic abilities, what the other pilots called his space heart, flooded him with sensations. Dozens of minds curious and alert, emanating from the massive vessel before him. Not hostile, not yet, but cautious. Prepared. Among them, he felt a commanding presence that radiated dignity and measured authority, another that burned with warrior's honor, and something else entirely. A mind that processed thought with crystalline clarity but felt somehow different from human consciousness. Cotter's fingers hesitated over the weapon's controls. Every instinct screamed that he'd been thrown into enemy territory, that Sandrock's limited ammunition and energy reserves meant he couldn't afford a prolonged engagement. But the emotions washing over him from that ship carried no malice, no intent to conquer or destroy. "This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise." A voice suddenly filled Sandrock's cockpit, transmitted on a frequency the mobile suit's systems had automatically adapted to receive. The words were in a language Cotter had never heard, yet somehow his communication array translated them into comprehensible speech. "Your vessel emerged from a subspace anomaly into Federation space. We mean you no harm. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." Cotter swallowed hard, his hand moving to activate his own communications system. He'd been trained for combat, for tactical decisions in the heat of battle, for navigating the brutal politics of the Earth's sphere's perpetual war. But first contact with what appeared to be an alien civilization. That was beyond anything Operation Meteor had prepared him for. "This is Quatre Raberba Winner, pilot of the mobile suit Gundam Sandrock," he responded, keeping his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. I don't know where I am. We were engaged in combat near the L4 colony cluster when some kind of spatial distortion pulled us through. I'm not your enemy. I don't want to fight." On the Enterprise bridge, the crew exchanged glances. The voice that came through their communications was young, human-sounding despite the universal translator's processing, and carried an earnestness that matched what Troy had sensed. "Mr. Data, can you determine if that mobile suit poses an immediate threat?" Picard asked quietly. "Weapons are active but not targeting us, Captain," Data replied. "The pilot's statement appears truthful based on his vessel's current posture. However, the armaments I'm detecting could potentially inflict significant damage to our shields if deployed. I recommend maintaining tactical readiness while pursuing diplomatic contact." Picard nodded, returning his attention to the view screen where Gundam Sandrock floated against the stars like a warrior from myth transplanted into reality. "Mr. Winner, I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard. You have emerged in an area of space governed by the United Federation of Planets, an alliance of worlds dedicated to peaceful exploration and mutual cooperation. Your mention of combat and colonies suggests you come from a civilization at war. Is that correct?" In his cockpit, Cotter felt the weight of that question. How could he explain the Earth's sphere's endless conflicts, the struggle between Earth and the space colonies, the desperate measures that had created the Gundams themselves? "Yes, Captain. My people, we're fighting for independence, for the right to determine our own futures. The Gundams were created as a last resort, to break the cycle of oppression and war. A weapon designed to end war." Picard murmured, something in his expression suggesting he'd encountered such paradoxes before. "A noble goal, if perhaps contradictory in its execution." If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Alive long and prosper. Counselor. Picard said quietly. Your assessment? Troy's expression was thoughtful, almost sympathetic. He's telling the truth, Captain. There's no deception in him. What I'm sensing is someone who carries the weight of terrible choices but remains fundamentally kind. He's frightened, disoriented, but his first instinct isn't aggression, it's communication. Picard made his decision. Mr. Winner, I propose we continue this conversation in a more appropriate setting. Would you be willing to come aboard the Enterprise? We may be able to help you understand what happened and determine if there's a way to return you to your home. Cotter's breath caught. Board their ship? Leave Sandrock vulnerable? But as his empathic senses reached out again, he felt no trap, no ambush waiting. Only genuine curiosity, and the offer of assistance. In a universe suddenly strange and unfamiliar, these people might be his only chance of finding answers. Yes, Captain. But I need to know, can you guarantee Sandrock's safety? This mobile suit is more than a machine to me. It represents hope for my people. You have my word, Picard replied, and something in his tone carried the weight of absolute commitment. Your vessel will not be harmed or tampered with without your express permission. We are explorers, Mr. Winner, not thieves or conquerors. Cotter felt the truth of those words resonate through his space heart. Slowly, carefully, he began shutting down Sandrock's weapon systems, his hands trembling slightly as he committed to trust. Whatever universe he'd fallen into, whatever strange twist of fate had brought him here, the path forward began with a single choice: to meet these people not as enemies, but as the first inhabitants of a new and unknown frontier. The transporter room hummed with its characteristic energetic whine as Chief O'Brien worked the controls with practiced precision. Captain Picard stood at attention, flanked by Commander Riker, Lieutenant Worf, and Counselor Troy. It was standard first contact protocol, the command staff present to greet a potentially momentous visitor, security prepared but not overtly threatening, and the ship's empathic counselor ready to provide insight into their guest's emotional state. Captain, I'm having difficulty getting a clean lock, O'Brien reported, his Irish accent thickening slightly with frustration. Whatever that machine is made of, it's interfering with the annular confinement beam. I can detect the pilot's biosignature inside, but extracting him without destabilizing the pattern is tricky. Take your time, Chief, Picard replied calmly. Mr. Winner, we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our transport system. The composition of your vessel's hull is creating interference. Can you exit your craft manually? In Sandrock's cockpit, Cotter had already anticipated the problem. Gundanium alloy was designed to resist energy weapons, electromagnetic pulses, and sensor penetration. Apparently it also resisted whatever technology these people used for transportation. Understood, Captain? Give me 2 minutes. He initiated Sandrock's atmospheric deployment sequence. The mobile suit's chest hatch unsealed with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and Cotter pulled himself through the narrow opening. His white and blue pilot suit was designed for zero-gravity operation, the helmet's visor currently retracted to reveal his youthful face. At 17, Quatre Raberba Winner looked more like an aristocratic student than a guerrilla fighter, his platinum blonde hair and refined features suggesting gentility rather than the harsh realities of mobile suit combat. He activated his suit's maneuvering thrusters, small bursts of compressed gas pushing him away from Sandrock's imposing frame. The mobile suit hung in space behind him like a golden sentinel, its mono-eye dark but somehow still watchful. Cotter had left the communication channel open, allowing Sandrock's AI to monitor his vital signs and maintain a standby posture. If anything went wrong, the Gundam would reactivate automatically. I'm clear of my mobile suit, Captain, Cotter transmitted. Ready for transport when you are. O'Brien's fingers danced across his console. I've got him, sir. Energizing now. The familiar shimmer of the transporter effect enveloped Cotter, and he felt a sensation unlike anything he'd experienced, a tingling dissolution followed by instantaneous reconstitution. The stars and the black void vanished, replaced by a clean, well-lit chamber with curved walls and a platform beneath his feet. 4 figures stood before him, and Cotter's empathic senses immediately flooded with their distinct emotional signatures. The central figure radiated calm authority and intellectual curiosity, an older man with a dignified bearing, his burgundy and black uniform immaculate. To his right stood a tall, bearded man whose emotions carried warmth and professional assessment in equal measure. On the left, a massive warrior whose surface discipline barely contained a furnace of controlled aggression and honor-bound duty. And beside the captain, a woman whose empathic presence resonated with Cotter's own abilities like a tuning fork, her compassionate nature immediately recognizable. Cotter's boots touched the transporter pad, and he automatically bowed, a gesture of respect ingrained by his Arabian heritage and the formal protocols of the Winner family. "Captain Picard, thank you for receiving me. I apologize for any alarm my arrival may have caused." Picard stepped forward, his expression genuinely welcoming despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Welcome aboard the Enterprise, Mr. Winner. I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard. This is my first officer, Commander William Riker, Lieutenant Worf, our Chief of Security, and Counselor Deanna Troi." Riker offered a confident smile and an extended hand, a gesture Cotter recognized and accepted, the commander's grip firm but not aggressive. "Quite an entrance you made. In my years with Starfleet, I've seen a lot of unusual vessels, but nothing quite like your mobile suit." "Gundam Sandrock," Cotter said softly, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. "She's one of 5 Gundams constructed for Operation Meteor. Each pilot and mobile suit combination was designed for specific tactical roles. Sandrock specializes in close-quarters combat and desert warfare." Worf's eyes narrowed slightly, his warrior's instincts immediately grasping the implications. 5 war machines of that capability? Your conflict must be extensive." The observation struck a nerve, and Cotter's expression darkened with memories of burning colonies and battlefields littered with destroyed mobile suits. The Earth's sphere has known almost continuous war for decades. The space colonies sought independence from Earth's oppressive control. The Gundams were created as a deterrent, weapons powerful enough to make our enemies reconsider the cost of continued subjugation. "A philosophy of peace through superior firepower," Picard observed, his tone neutral but his eyes searching Cotter's face. "Many civilizations have walked that path. Few have found it leads where they hoped." "I know," Cotter admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice made Troy's empathic senses ache with sympathetic pain. "I hate violence, Captain. Every battle, every enemy mobile suit I destroy, every life that ends because I pulled a trigger, it tears at something inside me. But when the alternative is allowing innocent people to suffer under tyranny, when children in the colonies go hungry because Earth appropriates their resources, what choice do we have?" Troi stepped forward, her dark eyes meeting Cotter's with understanding that transcended words. "You're an empath," she said gently. "I can sense it. You feel the emotions of those around you, perhaps even those you fight against." Cotter's breath caught. He'd never met anyone who understood his abilities, who shared them. The other Gundam pilots knew about his space heart, but none of them possessed the same sensitivity. "Yes. It's a curse and a gift. I know when I'm about to take a life. I feel their fear, their desperation. But I also feel the hope of those I'm protecting, the relief when a battle ends and they're still alive." "Then you understand the weight of command," Picard said quietly, and something in his expression suggested he spoke from personal experience. "The burden of making impossible choices with full awareness of their consequences. That understanding, Mr. Winner, speaks well of your character, regardless of the circumstances that forged it." Worf shifted his stance slightly, his professional assessment ongoing. "Captain, I recommend we move this conversation to a conference room. Mr. Winner's vessel remains in open space, and its presence may attract unwanted attention if any ships pass through this sector." "Agreed," Picard nodded. "Mr. Winner, if you would accompany us, we can discuss your situation in more comfortable surroundings. I'm certain you have questions about where you are, and we have many questions about how you came to be here." Cotter followed as the group moved through Enterprise's corridors, his eyes widening at the clean, peaceful efficiency of the ship. Crew members passed in the hallways, humans, certainly, but also beings he couldn't immediately classify. A gold-skinned officer with ridged features nodded respectfully to the captain. A slender figure with pointed ears and sharply angled eyebrows studied a PDD with absolute concentration. The diversity was staggering, and yet everyone moved with purpose and mutual respect. "Your ship is beautiful," Quatre said, unable to contain his wonder. "In my universe, military vessels are purely functional. This feels more like a city in space than a warship." "The Enterprise is not a warship," Riker explained as they entered a turbolift. "She's a deep space explorer. We're out here to seek out new life and new civilizations, to expand the Federation's understanding of the galaxy. We have weapons for defense, but our primary mission is scientific discovery and diplomatic contact." "Deck 8, Picard commanded, and the turbolift hummed into motion. The concept seemed almost fantastical to Quatre. A massive, powerful vessel like this dedicated to exploration rather than conquest or defense? In the Earth sphere, every resource was militarized, every technological advancement immediately weaponized. The very idea of a society wealthy and secure enough to send ships into unknown space simply to learn was almost beyond comprehension. The conference room featured a large oval table with comfortable chairs and floor-to-ceiling viewports showing the stars beyond. And there, visible through the transparent aluminum, hung Gundam Sandrock, a monument to war floating in a universe apparently dedicated to peace. As they settled into seats, a door chimed and slid open. An officer entered whose appearance made Cotter's empathic senses reel with cognitive dissonance. He appeared human, pale golden skin, slicked back dark hair, a Starfleet uniform identical to the others. But the emotional signature was completely absent. Not suppressed or controlled like Worf's disciplined fury, but simply, not there. Like sensing a photograph of a person rather than the person themselves. "Ah, Data," Picard acknowledged. "Mr. Winner, allow me to introduce Lieutenant Commander Data, our Chief Operations Officer and Second Officer." Data tilted his head in a gesture that was somehow both mechanical and curious. "Fascinating. Captain, I have completed my analysis of the energy readings from Mr. Winner's arrival. The subspace anomaly that brought him here was not random. It appears to have been triggered by a confluence of factors. Exotic particle emissions consistent with his mobile suit's power system, a pre-existing subspace instability in his origin universe, and what I can only describe as a dimensional resonance cascade." Quatre leaned forward, desperate for understanding. "Can you reverse it? Send me back?" Data's expression, if it could be called that, remained neutral, but his voice carried a note that might have been sympathy. "Unknown. The anomaly collapsed immediately after your transit. Recreating the exact conditions would require detailed knowledge of your universe's quantum signature and access to technology capable of controlled dimensional manipulation. The Federation has theoretical frameworks for such technology, but no practical applications." The words struck Quatre like a physical blow. Trapped. Potentially forever. Cut off from the other Gundam pilots, from the colonies he'd sworn to protect, from everything and everyone he knew. His hands gripped the edge of the conference table, knuckles widening. Troy's hand reached across the table, not quite touching his but close enough to offer comfort. "We won't abandon you, Quatre. If there's a way to return you home, we'll find it. And until then, you're not a prisoner here. You're a guest. A guest who arrived in a war machine." Worf interjected, his tone not accusatory but pragmatic. "Captain, we must address the tactical implications. Mr. Winner's vessel possesses technology unknown to the Federation. Its whole composition alone could revolutionize our defensive capabilities. Other powers, the Romulans, the Cardassians, would see it as a strategic asset worth acquiring." Cotter's eyes hardened, and for the first time, the gentle empath revealed the steel beneath his compassionate exterior. "Sandrock isn't for sale, and she isn't a prize to be claimed. I'd destroy her before I let her become a tool for oppression in any universe." No one is suggesting otherwise, Picard said firmly, his gaze sweeping across his officers with an unspoken command for restraint. However, Lieutenant Worf raises a valid concern. Your presence here, Mr. Winner, represents an unknown variable in a delicate political balance. The Federation maintains peaceful but tense relationships with several neighboring powers. If knowledge of your mobile suit's capabilities becomes widespread, it could destabilize decades of careful diplomacy. Riker folded his hands on the table, his expression thoughtful. We have options. Starfleet could offer you asylum, provide quarters on the Enterprise or at a starbase while we research a way to send you home. In exchange, you need to agree to certain restrictions on your mobile suit's deployment. Restrictions? Carter repeated, the word tasting bitter. I escaped one cage only to find another waiting in a different universe? Not a cage, Picard corrected gently but firmly. Responsibility. You've found yourself in a complex political landscape you don't fully understand, piloting a weapon that could shift the balance of power in ways that might lead to the very conflicts you despise. We're asking you to trust our judgment while you learn the realities of this universe. Carter closed his eyes, his empathic senses reaching outward. From Picard, he felt unwavering integrity and genuine concern for both Carter's well-being and the larger consequences of his presence. From Riker, professional caution balanced with genuine goodwill. From Worf, warrior's respect and protective instinct toward his ship and crew. From Troi, compassion that understood his isolation and fear. From Data, curiosity unmarred by prejudice or greed. These were good people. In a universe gone mad with war, Carter had learned to recognize honor when he encountered it. I'll cooperate, Captain, he said finally, opening his eyes. But I need you to understand something. I'm a Gundam pilot. We were created to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, to be the shield for the innocent and the sword against tyranny. If I see oppression, if I encounter people suffering under the kind of cruelty I've fought against my entire life, I won't stand idle. I can't. That's not who I am. Picard's lips curved in the faintest smile, and something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Then perhaps, Mr. Winner, you'll find that the Federation's principles and your own are not as incompatible as you fear. We, too, stand against tyranny. We simply employ different methods. Tell me about these methods, Carter said, leaning back in his chair. Tell me about this Federation, about the universe I've fallen into. If I'm going to be here for any length of time, I need to understand the rules of this new battlefield. And as Picard began to explain the history of the United Federation of Planets, the principles of the Prime Directive, and the complex web of alliances and tensions that define the 24th century, Quatre Raberba Winner listened with the intensity of a warrior learning the terrain of an unfamiliar war. Outside the viewport, Gundam Sandrock waited in silent vigil, a testament to conflicts this universe had never witnessed, but might soon come to understand all too well. The hours passed as Picard, Data, and Riker educated Carter on the fundamental realities of his new circumstances. The young pilot absorbed information with remarkable speed, his tactical mind organizing the complex political landscape into patterns he could understand. The Federation's idealism reminded him of the colony's dreams before war corrupted them. The Klingon Empire's honor codes resonated with aspects of his own warrior philosophy. The Romulan strategic duplicity paralleled the machinations of OZ and the Earth Alliance. The Borg's assimilation imperative represented a nightmare beyond even the most dystopian outcomes he'd envisioned for the Earth sphere. But it was the Prime Directive that troubled him most deeply. Let me understand this correctly, Carter said, his voice carrying an edge of barely controlled frustration. If you encounter a pre-warp civilization being oppressed by a more advanced power, the Prime Directive forbids intervention? The Prime Directive specifically prohibits interference with the internal development of pre-warp civilizations, Picard clarified, his tone patient but firm. However, if an outside power is interfering with such a civilization, that creates a different set of circumstances. The application of the Prime Directive is not always straightforward, and Starfleet captains are granted significant latitude in interpreting its requirements based on specific situations. Latitude, Carter repeated, and Troy could sense his internal struggle. Captain, with respect, in my experience, latitude is what people call moral flexibility when they don't want to admit they're choosing inaction over what's right. Worf's eyebrows rose slightly. Few people challenged the captain so directly, especially during their first meeting. But rather than taking offense, Picard leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. You're not wrong to question it, Mr. Winner. The Prime Directive is perhaps the most debated regulation in Starfleet. I have wrestled with its implications throughout my career, and I suspect I will continue to do so until the day I retire. But consider this: how many civilizations have destroyed themselves by acquiring technology or knowledge before they were culturally prepared to wield it responsibly? How many societies have had their natural development twisted by well-intentioned interference? And how many have suffered needlessly while more powerful civilizations stood by and watched? Carter countered. Captain, I've seen what happens when good people decide that complex circumstances justify inaction. Children die. Colonies burn. Tyrants consolidate power because no one had the courage to stop them when it mattered. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of philosophical principles colliding with moral imperatives. Data tilted his head, his positronic brain processing the ethical dimensions of the debate. An interesting paradox, the android observed. Mr. Winner's position assumes that intervention can be conducted without creating dependency or fundamentally altering a society's trajectory in unforeseen ways. Captain Picard's interpretation of the Prime Directive acknowledges that even beneficial interference carries consequences that may not become apparent for generations. But surely there are clear-cut cases, Carter pressed. Surely there are situations where the moral calculus is obvious? Before Picard could respond, the comm system activated. Bridge to Captain Picard. It was Lieutenant Worf's voice. He had returned to his station after the initial introductions. Go ahead, Lieutenant. Captain, we are receiving a distress signal from a Federation colony on Tarsus 4. Reports indicate a Ferengi vessel has taken several colonists hostage and is demanding dilithium in exchange for their release. Picard was on his feet instantly, his command presence transforming the academic discussion into immediate action. Red alert. Mr. Winner, please excuse us, duty calls. Commander Data with me. Commander Riker, you have the con. Counselor Troy, please escort Mr. Winner to guest quarters. But Carter was already standing, his expression intense. Captain, I request permission to assist. Absolutely not, Picard said firmly. You are not a member of this crew, and deploying your mobile suit would save lives, Carter interrupted, his empathic senses already reaching toward the distant colony, feeling the echoes of fear and desperation even across the vast distance. I can feel them, Captain. The hostages. Their terror. I can help. Picard's jaw tightened, but before he could issue a definitive refusal, Riker interjected. Captain, we're 2 hours from Tarsus 4 at maximum warp. The Ferengi vessel is a Marauder class, heavily armed for a civilian ship. If negotiations fail, having an additional tactical asset might prevent casualties. An asset we know nothing about. Picard countered. Mr. Winner, I understand your desire to help, but you have no training in Starfleet protocols, no familiarity with our tactical procedures, and your mobile suit's capabilities are completely unknown to our tactical officers. Deploying you into a hostage situation would be irresponsible. Carter's hands clenched at his sides, frustration warring with respect for the captain's authority. Everything in his training screamed at him to act, to deploy Sandrock and end the threat before innocents suffered. But he was not in his universe anymore. The rules had changed, even if the fundamental moral imperatives had not. Troy stepped forward, her empathic senses detecting something in Carter's emotional signature that alarmed her. Carter, I know you want to help. But you need to trust Captain Picard. He's handled situations like this dozens of times. Has he ever failed? Carter asked quietly. Has there ever been a time when following protocol resulted in innocent deaths that could have been prevented? The question hung in the air like an accusation, and the subtle shift in Picard's expression provided the answer before his words did. Yes, the captain admitted. And I carried the weight of those failures every day. But I also carried the knowledge that reckless action, however well-intentioned, has led to far worse outcomes. I am asking you to trust in our methods, even if they seem overly cautious by your standards. Quatre met Picard's eyes, and his space heart detected no dishonesty, no callous disregard for life. Only the burden of command, the terrible calculus of balancing risks and responsibilities that Quatre himself knew all too well from leading mobile suit operations. I'll remain aboard, Quatre said finally. But Captain, I'm asking you. Please don't let those people die because of rules and procedures. In my universe, that's how we lost everything that mattered. Picard nodded, acknowledging both the concession and the implicit plea. You have my word, Mr. Winner. Counselor, please show our guest to quarters. Mr. Winner, you're welcome to observe from the bridge once we arrive, provided you agree to follow all instructions without question. Agreed, Quatre said, though every instinct still screamed at him to sprint to the shuttle bay, retrieve Sandrock, and solve the problem the way Gundam pilots were trained to solve problems, with overwhelming force and absolute commitment. As Picard and Data strode toward the turbolift, Troy gently guided Quatre in the opposite direction. The corridors of the Enterprise hummed with purposeful activity as the ship went to red alert, crew members moving to battle stations with practiced efficiency. You think I'm too aggressive, Quatre said quietly as they walked. Too quick to resort to violence. No, Troy replied, surprising him. I think you're someone who has been forced to make impossible choices in impossible circumstances. Your empathic abilities mean you feel the cost of an action more acutely than most people. That's not a flaw, Quatre. But it also means you need to be careful not to let that pain drive you towards solutions that might create more harm than they prevent. They entered a turbolift, and Troy requested Deck 9. As the lift hummed into motion, Quatre closed his eyes and reached outward with his space heart. The Enterprise's crew radiated determination and controlled tension, professionals preparing for a crisis. But there was no bloodlust, no eagerness for combat. These were people who genuinely wanted to resolve the situation peacefully. So different from the mobile suit pilots he fought against, so many of whom had embraced war's brutality with enthusiasm or resigned acceptance. In my universe, Quatre said softly, I've killed hundreds of people. Maybe thousands. Every enemy mobile suit pilot, every soldier who happened to be in a base when we attacked, every person whose life ended because I made a tactical decision that prioritized the mission over minimizing casualties. I remember their faces, Counselor. My abilities make sure of that. I feel them die. Troy's hand found his shoulder, her touch gentle but grounding. And yet you continue to fight. Why? Because if I don't, more innocents suffer. The colonies need the Gundams. Without us, Earth would crush them completely, and millions would live under oppression or die in the subjugation. My pain, my guilt, those are prices I pay so others don't have to. He opened his eyes, meeting Troy's gaze. But here, in this universe, you have the luxury of choosing peace. You're strong enough that you don't have to make the terrible choices I've made. I don't know if I envy you that or if I think it makes you naive. The turbolift doors opened onto Deck 9, and Troy led him down another corridor to a set of guest quarters. The door slid open to reveal a comfortable suite, not luxurious, but far more pleasant than the Spartan accommodations Quatre was accustomed to in Gundam barracks. We're not naive, Troy said as Quatre stepped inside, examining the space with the careful attention of someone accustomed to assessing tactical environments. We've fought wars, Quatre. The Federation has faced threats that nearly destroyed us. But we've learned that there are alternatives to perpetual conflict, and we've chosen to build our civilization around those alternatives. Not because it's easy, but because we believe it's right. And when those alternatives fail? Quatre asked. What happens to the people who needed you while you were exploring diplomatic options? Troy had no immediate answer, because the truth was complex and sometimes painful. Instead, she touched the comm panel beside the door. "Computer, please provide Mr. Winner with access to the ship's library. Educational database only. Restrict access to tactical systems and classified information." "Acknowledged," the computer's feminine voice responded. "Learn about us," Troy suggested. "Not just the official history, but the debates, the controversies, the times we failed and the times we succeeded. Then you can make a more informed judgment about whether we're naive or simply choosing a different path than the one you've known." After she left, Cotter stood in the center of his quarters, feeling more alone than he had since the first day of Gundam pilot training. Outside, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, Sandrock waited. His partner, his weapon, his responsibility. The mobile suit represented everything he'd been, everything he'd sacrificed. But this universe represented something else, a possibility he never dared imagine. A place where strength served exploration rather than conquest, where diversity was celebrated rather than feared, where the default response to the unknown was curiosity rather than aggression. Could such a universe survive contact with the harsh realities he'd brought with him? Or would Gundam Sandrock's presence prove to be the catalyst that corrupted this fragile peace, introducing the very conflicts this civilization had worked so hard to transcend? Cotter moved to the viewport, watching the stars streak past as the Enterprise accelerated to warp speed. Somewhere ahead, hostages waited for rescue. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a question gnawed at his conscience. If Picard's methods failed, if those hostages died because Starfleet chose negotiation over decisive action, would Cotter be able to forgive himself for standing idle when Sandrock could have made the difference? His hands pressed against the transparent aluminum, and he whispered a prayer in Arabic, a plea for wisdom, for guidance, for the strength to trust in people he just met with stakes he couldn't fully comprehend. The space heart that had guided him through countless battles offered no answers, only the distant echo of fear from a colony light years away and the steady, determined presence of a crew preparing to face danger with principles instead of firepower. Quatre Raberba Winner, Gundam pilot and warrior for peace, had entered a universe where his greatest weapons might be the very things he'd never been trained to use: patience, faith, and the willingness to let others fight battles in ways he never imagined. The Enterprise dropped out of warp at the edge of the Tarsus 4 system, sensors immediately locking onto the Ferengi Marauder in orbit above the colony. Cotter stood at the rear of the bridge, as promised, positioned where he could observe but not interfere. His pilot instincts cataloged everything: the tactical displays, the crew's movements, the way Worf's fingers hovered over weapon controls while Picard's voice remained calm and diplomatic. "Hailing frequencies open, Captain," Lieutenant Worf reported. "Ferengi vessel, this is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. You are in violation of Federation law. Release your hostages immediately and prepare to be taken into custody." The viewscreen flickered, revealing a Ferengi male whose lobes seemed to quiver with barely suppressed greed. Daimon Goss wore elaborate robes that suggested wealth, and his sharp teeth showed in what might have been a smile or a threat display. "Ah, Captain Picard! The legendary Enterprise arrives to save the day. How wonderfully predictable." Goss's voice carried mock enthusiasm. "I'm afraid your arrival changes nothing. I have 23 colonists aboard my ship, and unless the Tarsus 4 Colony Administration transfers 200 bars of gold-pressed latinum within the next hour, these unfortunate souls will experience the vacuum of space firsthand." Cotter's hands clenched. Through his empathic abilities, he could feel the hostages, their terror, their desperate hope that the Enterprise's arrival meant salvation. 23 souls hanging in the balance while this creature negotiated for profit. "You know we cannot allow that," Picard replied, his voice carrying steel beneath the diplomatic veneer. "The Federation does not negotiate with criminals. However, I am authorized to offer you safe passage to the nearest starbase where you will receive a fair trial. Surrender peacefully, and I will personally ensure that your cooperation is reflected in the sentencing recommendations." Goss's laugh was like metal scraping against metal. "A fair trial? How generous!" And how utterly worthless. No, Captain, I think I'll stick with my original plan. You have 58 minutes remaining. Tick-tock. The screen went dark. Mr. Worf, analysis. Picard commanded. The Marauder shields are up, weapons armed. I'm detecting 23 human life signs aboard their vessel, contained in what appears to be a cargo bay with minimal life support. The Ferengi crew numbers 12. Worf's expression darkened. Captain, their weapons are locked onto the cargo bay. If they carry out their threat, they'll kill their own leverage. Riker interjected. Daimon Goss is bluffing. No Ferengi would destroy such valuable commodities without payment. Data's console chirped with incoming data. Commander, I must disagree. Daimon Goss has a recorded history of extreme negotiation tactics. Starfleet intelligence has linked him to 3 previous incidents where hostages were killed to demonstrate resolve. In each case, subsequent hostages were released after payment, suggesting a calculated strategy of establishing credibility through limited casualties. Cotter stepped forward, unable to remain silent. He's going to kill them. Not all of them, just enough to prove he's serious. You have to act now. Picard turned, his expression firm but not unkind. Mr. Winner, you agreed to observe without interference. I agreed before I understood what you were facing. Cotter shot back. Captain, I can feel them. The hostages. They know something's wrong. The Ferengi are preparing too. He stopped, his empathic senses screaming alarm. Captain, they're selecting someone. A woman. They're bringing her forward. Troy's eyes widened. He's right. I sense so no. They're going to make an example. Worf's tactical display flared with activity. Captain, the Marauder is dropping shields on a small section of their hull, an airlock. They're opening it. Hail them! Picard commanded, his calm fracturing for the first time. Daimon Goss, stand down immediately! The view screen activated, showing Goss with a Ferengi guard dragging a terrified human woman toward a visible airlock. Her face was streaked with tears, her lips moving in what might have been prayers or pleas. Cotter's empathic senses crashed into him like a physical wave. Her absolute terror, her knowledge of impending death, her desperate hope for a miracle that wasn't coming. 57 minutes, Captain, Goss said pleasantly. I find that humans respond better to concrete demonstrations than abstract threats. This unfortunate female will serve as... Cotter was moving before conscious thought caught up to instinct. His hand slammed the comm panel on the nearest station. Sandrock, emergency activation. Authorization Winner Cotter, combat deployment. Alarms shrieked across the bridge as, outside the Enterprise, Gundam Sandrock systems flared to life. The mobile suit's mono-eye blazed with sudden awareness, thrusters igniting in a burst of controlled fury. The Gundam accelerated with speeds that made Worf's tactical display struggle to track it, maneuvering thrusters firing in precise sequences that demonstrated combat piloting beyond anything Federation technology could match. What the? Riker started, but Cotter was already running toward the turbolift. Mr. Winner, stand down. Picard commanded, but the young pilot was gone, the turbolift doors closing behind him as he headed for the shuttle bay where his pilot's suit waited. Captain, that machine is approaching the Ferengi vessel at attack speed. Worf reported, his voice carrying both alarm and something that might have been admiration. Its acceleration profile is impossible for its mass. How is it maneuvering like that? On the view screen, Daimon Goss's expression shifted from smug confidence to sudden uncertainty as his sensors detected the golden giant bearing down on his position. What is that? Captain Picard, call off your attack or... Sandrock closed the distance in seconds, and through the remote piloting interface Cotter had activated from the bridge, the mobile suit's right arm extended. The heat shotel, currently unpowered but still a massive curved blade of superhard alloy, swept through space in an arc that slammed into the Marauder's shields with precisely calculated force. The Ferengi ship rocked violently, shields flaring and then failing under the physical impact. Emergency klaxons wailed aboard the Marauder as the ship's systems struggled to compensate. "My shields!" Gauss shrieked. "He disabled my shields!" "That's impossible. Energy weapons can't. That wasn't an energy weapon at all." Sandrock's mono eye fixed on the Marauder's bridge, and when Cotter's voice emerged from the mobile suit's external speakers, it carried none of the gentle compassion he'd shown aboard the Enterprise. This was the voice of a Gundam pilot, cold and absolute. "Release the hostages immediately, or I will tear your ship apart piece by piece. You have 10 seconds to comply." Cotter sprinted into the shuttle bay, his fingers flying across the control panel of his pilot's suit as he activated its full systems. The neural interface helmet slid into place, and suddenly he wasn't just remotely controlling Sandrock. He was Sandrock, feeling the mobile suit's responses as extensions of his own body. Through the Gundam's sensors, he watched Gauss frantically issue orders. The woman at the airlock was yanked backward, the outer door sealing. The cargo bay containing the hostages showed on Sandrock's thermal imaging. 23 warm bodies huddled together, alive but terrified. "Captain Picard!" Gauss screamed. "Control your weapon! This is an act of war!" On the Enterprise bridge, Picard's expression was stone. "Mr. Worf, weapon status on the Marauder?" "Their weapons are still armed, Captain, but they're not targeting the cargo bay anymore. They're targeting the mobile suit." "Then Daimon Gauss has made his choice. Mr. Data, monitor the situation. If the Ferengi show any indication of harming hostages, you are authorized to disable their weapons systems." Data's fingers moved across his console with inhuman precision. "Aye, Captain." Though I must note that Mr. Winner's intervention appears to have fundamentally altered the tactical equation. That was an understatement. Aboard the Marauder, Gauss stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His weapons, designed to threaten Federation starships at a distance, were useless against a target that could literally grab his ship and tear it apart with mechanical hands. His shields, his primary defense, had been defeated by a simple physical impact delivered with impossible force. The economics of the situation shifted in his mind with the lightning calculation that defined successful Ferengi merchants. 23 hostages versus the value of his ship, his cargo, and his life. The 76th rule of acquisition. Every once in a while, declare peace. It confuses the hell out of your enemies. I'm releasing the hostages," Gauss stammered. "Transporting them to the colony surface now. See? I'm a reasonable businessman. We can all walk away from this." On Cotter's heads-up display, he watched as transporter signatures bloomed, 23 colonists materializing safely on Tarsus IV's surface. His empathic senses confirmed their survival, feeling their relief crash over him like a wave of pure gratitude. But he also felt something else. Aboard the Marauder, Gauss's emotions shifted from fear to calculating cunning. The Ferengi was planning something, some final play that would let him escape with something valuable enough to justify the failed operation. Sandrock's sensors detected at the same moment Cotter's space heart did, a small cargo pod ejecting from the Marauder's ventral hull, accelerating away on a trajectory that would take it into the planet's atmosphere. Thermal imaging showed the pod contained technology, not people. Stolen goods, undoubtedly, the real prize Gauss had come for while the hostage situation provided cover. "You're not getting away," Cotter muttered, Sandrock's thrusters firing in a burst that sent the mobile suit into pursuit. The Gundam's hand reached out, fingers closing around the cargo pod with gentle precision despite the violent acceleration. On the Enterprise bridge, Worf's tactical display tracked the mobile suit's movements with something approaching awe. "Captain, that machine just performed a high-speed intercept maneuver that would require precision beyond our best helmsman. And it's operating without a pilot physically aboard. Remote piloting," Data observed. "Fascinating. The control system must utilize quantum entanglement communication to eliminate signal lag. The engineering principles alone would revolutionize Federation robotics." Picard watched the viewscreen, where Sandrock now held both the cargo pod and had positioned itself between the Marauder and any escape vectors. "Mr. Winner," he said quietly into the comm system, knowing the young pilot could hear him through whatever interface controlled the mobile suit. "You've secured the hostages and prevented Daimon Goss's escape. Stand down and allow us to take the Ferengi into custody through proper channels." For a long moment, Sandrock remained motionless, the Gundam's mono eye fixed on the Marauder like a predator considering whether to release or devour its prey. Carter's finger hovered over the weapon's activation control. The heat shotels could slice through the Marauder's hull like a knife through paper. Goss deserved it, had earned death by being willing to murder innocents for profit. But then Carter remembered Picard's words. "We simply employed different methods." Troy's gentle insistence that alternatives existed. The sight of the Enterprise crew, working together with professionalism and mutual respect instead of the desperate, violent camaraderie that defined Gundam operations. "Sandrock, standby mode," Carter commanded. The mobile suit's aggressive posture relaxed, weapon arms lowering to neutral positions, though the Gundam maintained its position between the Marauder and Freedom. Minutes later, Carter stood in the shuttle bay as Sandrock was tractored back aboard the Enterprise, the mobile suit carefully positioned in the cargo bay specifically cleared for its storage. His pilot suit was still active, sweat dampening his hair, his hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline crash. The shuttle bay doors opened, and Captain Picard entered, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," Carter said before the captain could speak. "I disobeyed your direct orders. I acted without authorization. I put your mission at risk. By any military standard, I should be confined to quarters pending disciplinary action." Picard studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled, a small, knowing expression that carried understanding beyond words. "You saved 23 lives today, Mr. Winner. Daimon Goss's pattern of behavior suggests he absolutely would have killed that woman, possibly more, to establish credibility for future extortion attempts. Your intervention prevented that outcome." Picard's expression hardened slightly. "However, you also violated the chain of command, deployed a weapons system without authorization, and demonstrated technology that will now become known to every power within scanning range of this system." "I know," Carter said quietly. "And I'd do it again. Captain, I understand you have rules, procedures, protocols designed to prevent chaos and maintain order. I respect that. But when I felt that woman's terror, when I knew she was going to die while we negotiated and calculated and considered all the proper procedures, I couldn't just stand there. That's not who I am." "No," Picard agreed. "It's not. And perhaps that's precisely what makes you valuable, Mr. Winner, even as it makes you dangerous." He gestured toward the exit. "Come. We have much to discuss about the implications of what you've done today. Daimon Goss is in custody, but the Ferengi Commerce Authority will file complaints, and word of your mobile suit's capabilities will spread. You've announced your presence to this universe in the most dramatic way possible." As they walked, Carter asked, "Do you regret bringing me aboard, Captain? I'm disrupting your mission, compromising your principles." Picard considered the question seriously. "I regret that circumstances have placed you in a position where your instincts and our protocols are in conflict. But regret bringing you aboard? No, Mr. Winner. You represent something this universe has rarely encountered: absolute conviction married to genuine compassion, and the power to enforce that conviction. Whether that makes you an ally or a complication remains to be seen." They entered the turbolift together, and as it carried them toward the bridge, Carter felt the weight of Picard's words. He had saved lives today, yes. But he had also revealed Sandrock's existence to anyone monitoring subspace communications. In his universe, the Gundams operated in the shadows, striking without warning and vanishing before enemy forces could coordinate a response. Here, he had just announced to an entire galaxy that something new had arrived. Something powerful. Something that didn't follow their rules. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, others were already taking notice. 3 days after the Tarsus 4 incident, Quatre stood in the Enterprise's engineering section, watching with fascination as Commander Geordi LaForge examined Sandrock's power systems with instruments that seemed primitive compared to the diagnostic equipment in the Earth's sphere, yet somehow more sophisticated in their theoretical applications. "This is remarkable," LaForge said, his visor scanning the mobile suit's fusion reactor with wavelengths beyond human visual perception. "Your power generation is incredibly efficient. The containment field uses principles I've never seen before. It's almost like the reactor is self-regulating at a quantum level." Quatre stood on Sandrock's shoulder, having climbed the mobile suit using maintenance handholds built into the armor plating. From this vantage point, he could see the entire cargo bay that had been converted into temporary housing for his Gundam. "In my universe, mobile suit technology advanced rapidly because of constant warfare. Every design improvement meant the difference between survival and death. War as a catalyst for innovation," LaForge mused, his tone carrying neither approval nor condemnation, just acknowledgement of an uncomfortable truth. "The Federation's experienced that too. Some of our greatest technological leaps came during conflicts with the Borg or the Dominion." He adjusted his visor, focusing on the heat shotel mountings. These blade weapons, the thermal signatures suggest they can reach temperatures capable of melting tritanium. How do you prevent the heat from feeding back into the mobile suit's systems? Heat-resistant alloy conduits and radiator systems integrated into the arms. Quatre explained, grateful for a conversation that didn't revolve around regulations and restrictions. "Sandrock was designed for desert combat where heat management is critical. The same systems that prevent solar radiation from overloading the cockpit also handle the weapon's thermal output." LaForge's communicator chirped. "LaForge here. Geordi, this is the captain. Please ask Mr. Winner to join me in Observation Lounge 3. We have visitors." Quatre's empathic senses immediately detected tension in Picard's voice, controlled, professional, but definitely present. "On my way, Captain." He looked at LaForge. "Visitors? Could be anyone," the chief engineer replied, but his expression suggested he had suspicions he wasn't sharing. "Better not keep the captain waiting." Minutes later, Quatre entered the observation lounge to find an unexpected gathering. Captain Picard stood near the windows, his posture formal. Beside him were two individuals Quatre had never seen before. A Ferengi in ornate commercial robes whose lobes seemed larger and more decorated than Daimon Goss's, and a dignified human woman in civilian attire that suggested wealth and authority. "Ah, Mr. Winner," Picard said, his tone carefully neutral. "Allow me to introduce Liquidator Brunt, representing the Ferengi Commerce Authority, and Administrator-Chin of the Tarsus for Colonial Government." The Ferengi, Brunt, studied Quatre with calculating eyes that assessed value the way a jeweler appraises gemstones. "So this is the being who assaulted a legitimate Ferengi merchant vessel conducting authorized business negotiations." "Authorized?" Quatre's voice carried disbelief. "He was holding hostages at gunpoint and threatening to execute them. A legitimate negotiation tactic under Ferengi commercial law," Brunt replied smoothly. "Daimon Goss was engaged in a contractual dispute with the Tarsus for administration regarding payment for services rendered. Your violent interference resulted in significant damage to Ferengi property and the unlawful detention of a Ferengi citizen by Starfleet authorities." Administrator Chen stepped forward, her expression warm as she addressed Quatre directly. "Mr. Winner, on behalf of the Tarsus 4 colony and the 23 citizens whose lives you saved, I want to express our profound gratitude. Your courage and quick action prevented a tragedy. Those 23 individuals were never in actual danger," Brunt interjected. "Daimon Goss is a respected businessman who would never actually harm valuable negotiating assets. The display was merely theatrical, a standard practice to encourage prompt payment." Quatre's hands clenched. "I felt their terror. I know what Goss intended. He was absolutely prepared to kill that woman." "You felt their terror?" Brunt's tone dripped with skepticism. How convenient that your supposed empathic abilities provide justification for your actions. Tell me, does this feeling hold up in a court of law? Picard intervened smoothly. Liquidator Brunt, the Ferengi Commerce Authority's complaint has been duly noted and will be forwarded to the appropriate Federation diplomatic channels. However, Daimon Goss violated Federation law by taking hostages and making threats against Federation citizens. Your government's internal commercial regulations do not supersede our sovereignty within our own territory. A position the Ferengi Alliance disputes. Brunt replied. But that's not why I'm here, Captain. I'm here because of him. He pointed at Quatre. And more specifically, because of his remarkable machine. The Commerce Authority would like to open negotiations for the acquisition of this technology. The naked greed in Brunt's voice made Quatre's stomach turn. Sandrock isn't for sale. Everything is for sale, young human. It's simply a matter of finding the right price. Brunt produced a PADD from his robes, displaying figures that meant nothing to Quatre but apparently impressed Administrator Chen, whose eyebrows rose. The Ferengi Alliance is prepared to offer extremely generous compensation. Gold-pressed latinum, territorial concessions, trade agreements that would benefit your— Where did you say you were from? I didn't. Quatre replied coldly. Brunt's smile widened. Precisely. A being with no home, no resources, no support network in this universe. Captain Picard has been gracious in offering you temporary asylum. But surely you recognize that such hospitality cannot last forever. The Federation will eventually require you to either join Starfleet or relocate to civilian status. Either option leaves you vulnerable, dependent on their charity. The Liquidator leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. But wealth, true wealth, provides independence. Sell us your mobile suit's specifications, and you'll never need to rely on anyone's charity again. You could establish yourself anywhere in the galaxy, live in comfort, free from the burdens of combat and conflict that clearly weigh on your conscience. For just a moment, Quatre allowed himself to imagine it. No more fighting. No more feeling enemies die through his empathic connection. Enough resources to simply exist peacefully in this strange new universe. The temptation whispered seductively. Then he thought about what the Ferengi would do with Gundanium alloy technology. The weapons they would build. The conflicts they would instigate or escalate for profit. Sandrock's design principles twisted into tools of oppression and exploitation. No, Quatre said firmly. My answer is no, and it will remain no regardless of what you offer. Brunt's expression soured. Short-sighted. But I expected as much from someone who attacks merchant vessels over minor contractual disputes. Very well. The Ferengi Alliance will pursue other avenues of interest. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air as Brunt departed, leaving Quatre alone with Picard and Administrator Chen. Thank you for standing firm, Chen said quietly once the Ferengi was gone. If technology like yours fell into the wrong hands. She didn't finish the sentence, but Quatre understood her fear. Administrator, your gratitude is noted, Picard said diplomatically. Was there something else you wished to discuss? Chen hesitated, then spoke with careful formality. Captain Picard, the Tarsus IV Colonial Council has voted to extend an offer to Mr. Winner. We would like to offer him citizenship and residency on our world. We're a small colony, still developing, but we have resources and a community that values courage and compassion. Mr. Winner would be welcome among us, and his unique skills could be valuable in defending against threats like the one we just faced. Quatre blinked in surprise. An actual offer of citizenship, of belonging somewhere in this universe. It was more than he'd expected, more than he dared hope for during the lonely nights in his Enterprise quarters. That's very generous, he said slowly. But Administrator, you saw what Sandrock can do. If I settled on Tarsus IV, I'd be bringing a weapon of enormous destructive potential into your community. Other powers, like the Ferengi, would see your colony as a target, a place to acquire or neutralize that weapon. We understand the risks, Chen replied. But we also understand that the galaxy is becoming more dangerous. The Cardassians are expanding their territory, the Romulans are increasingly aggressive, and pirates and raiders operate with impunity in border regions. Having someone like you, with your abilities and your principles, could make the difference between survival and devastation. Picard's expression remained neutral, but Cotter's empathic senses detected concern beneath the professional facade. The captain understood the implications. A colony equipped with a Gundam would shift local power balances, potentially triggering escalations that could destabilize the entire sector. Administrator Chen, I need to be honest with you, Cotter said carefully. In my universe, the Gundams were created to break cycles of violence, but we became part of those cycles. Everywhere we went, conflict followed. I appreciate your offer, truly, but I don't know if bringing Sandrock to your world would protect you or just paint a target on your colony. Chen's expression showed disappointment but also respect. The offer remains open, Mr. Winner. If you change your mind, Tarsus 4 will welcome you. After she departed, Cotter and Picard stood alone in the observation lounge, watching the stars drift past through the viewport. You handled that well, Picard observed. Both the Ferengi's greed and the administrator's well-intentioned but potentially dangerous offer. I learned early that good intentions can lead to terrible outcomes, Cotter replied. The scientists who designed the Gundams believed we would be instruments of peace. Instead, we became the most effective killers in the Earth's sphere. He turned to face Picard directly. Captain, I need you to be honest with me. How long can I stay aboard the Enterprise? I know I'm a complication, a security risk, and probably a diplomatic nightmare. Picard considered his response carefully. Starfleet Command is concerned about your presence. They've reviewed my reports, analyzed the sensor data from the Tarsus 4 incident, and concluded that your mobile suit represents technology that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in this region of space. They've requested that you either submit Sandrock for detailed study or accept relocation to a secure facility where the mobile suit can be properly contained. Cotter's jaw tightened. Contained. Like a weapon too dangerous to be left in civilian hands. Like a strategic asset whose capabilities are not fully understood, Picard corrected gently. Mr. Winner, you must understand their perspective. A single pilot-operated war machine capable of disabling starship shields through physical force, maneuvering with precision beyond our best helmsmen, constructed of an alloy our sensors can barely penetrate. That's the definition of a strategic game-changer. If the Romulans acquired that technology, if the Cardassians reverse-engineered your mobile suit's systems, the consequences could be catastrophic. So I'm supposed to just hand over Sandrock? Let Starfleet dissect her, copy her, turn her into something she was never meant to be. Cotter's voice rose with emotion. Captain, that mobile suit is more than technology. She's my partner, my responsibility. The Magwanac Corps trusted me with her. I can't betray that trust. I'm not asking you to, Picard said firmly. I'm explaining the pressures we're both under. Starfleet wants answers. The Ferengi want profit. Colonial administrators want protection. And you, Mr. Winner, want to find a way home to the people and causes you left behind. He paused, his expression sympathetic. I bought you time by arguing that forcing your cooperation would violate Federation principles regarding asylum and refugee rights. But time is not unlimited. Cotter turned back to the viewport, his empathic senses reaching outward into the vastness of space. Somewhere out there, in a universe he couldn't reach, the other Gundam pilots continued their fight. Hero's cold precision, Duo's reckless courage, Troa's silent competence, Wufei's rigid honor. Were they searching for him? Did they think him dead? Had his disappearance compromised Operation Meteor? What would you do, Captain? Cotter asked quietly. If you were in my position, what choice would you make? Picard joined him at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back in his characteristic stance. I would try to understand this new universe before making irreversible decisions. I would learn its rules, its dangers, its opportunities. And I would trust that, given time and information, the right path would become clear. He glanced at Cotter. You're a tactician, Mr. Winner. You understand that sometimes the best strategy is to gather intelligence while maintaining defensive positions. In other words, wait and see. Cotter translated. In other words, be patient. A difficult discipline for a warrior, I know. But wars are rarely won in the first engagement. Their conversation was interrupted by Commander Data's voice over the comm system. Captain Picard to the bridge. We are detecting a distress signal from a civilian transport vessel. They report a hull breach and failing life support systems. Picard activated his communicator. On my way. Mr. Winner, you're welcome to observe from the bridge if you wish. As they moved toward the turbolift, Cotter felt the now familiar pull of other people's need, the empathic call that had defined his entire life as a Gundam pilot. People were in danger, and he had the power to help them. In his universe, that equation had always been simple. Here, surrounded by regulations and protocols and complex political considerations, nothing was simple anymore. But as the Enterprise's engines hummed to life, accelerating toward people who needed saving, Cotter realized something fundamental. Regardless of which universe he inhabited, some truths remained constant. People in danger deserved protection. Those with power had responsibility to those without. And sometimes, the right choice wasn't the one sanctioned by authority or approved by committee. It was the one your heart demanded you make. The question was whether he could maintain that conviction in a universe that seemed determined to complicate every moral certainty he'd ever held. The distress call came from the civilian transport Meridian's Hope, an aging vessel carrying colonists and cargo to a remote settlement in the Cardassian border region. By the time the Enterprise arrived, the situation had deteriorated beyond standard rescue protocols. The transport's hull breach had expanded, venting atmosphere faster than emergency containment fields could compensate. 17 people remained aboard, trapped in sections cut off from the functional escape pods. Transporter room, can you get a lock on the survivors? Picard asked urgently. Chief O'Brien's voice carried frustration. Negative, Captain. There's some kind of interference. The whole breach is venting plasma that's ionizing the surrounding space. I can't establish a stable enough pattern lock to safely beam anyone through it. Shuttle retrieval? Riker suggested. The hull is fragmenting. Data reported from his station. Multiple sections are experiencing catastrophic structural failure. A shuttle would need to navigate through debris fields while the transport continues to break apart. Estimated time to complete evacuation via shuttle, 42 minutes. The transport's structural integrity will fail completely in approximately 18 minutes. Picard's jaw tightened. Mathematics that killed, cold equations that meant some or all of those 17 people would die despite the Enterprise's best efforts. He had faced such scenarios before, had made impossible decisions and lived with the consequences. But familiarity didn't make them easier. Captain, Cotter said quietly from his observer position. Sandrock could do it. Every head on the bridge turned toward him. Explain, Picard commanded. Cotter moved to the tactical display, his fingers tracing the transport's fragmenting structure. My mobile suit doesn't need a pattern lock or a safe approach vector. Sandrock can maneuver through debris fields at speeds your shuttles can match. The Gundanium alloy hull will protect against plasma venting and structural impacts. I can physically retrieve the survivors, bring them back to the Enterprise in Sandrock's manipulator hands. Worf's expression was skeptical. Your mobile suit has no life support compartments for passengers. Exposure to vacuum would kill them. Not if I work fast enough. Cotter countered. I can feel them, Lieutenant. 17 people in 3 separate groups. If I retrieve them in sequence and minimize transit time, I can get them to the Enterprise's shuttle bay before hypoxia becomes fatal. It's risky, but it's better odds than they have right now. Unacceptable, Picard said firmly. The risk of catastrophic failure is too high. If you miscalculate, if the transport structure collapses while you're inside, if the plasma venting damages your mobile suit's systems, then I'll die trying to save them instead of watching them die while I stood safely aboard your ship. Carter interrupted, his voice carrying steel that reminded everyone he was a combat veteran despite his youth. Captain, with respect, you brought me here to observe your methods. I've observed. I've seen you exhaust every diplomatic option, every technical solution. Now I'm offering you an alternative that your regulations and technology can't provide. 17 lives, Captain. What are they worth? The bridge fell silent. Troy's empathic senses detected the emotional storm raging beneath Picard's controlled exterior, his desire to save those lives warring with his responsibility to prevent reckless actions that could make the situation worse. If I authorize this, Picard said slowly, you will follow my instructions explicitly. No improvisation, no heroic gestures beyond the mission parameters. You retrieve the survivors and return immediately. Understood? Understood. Carter agreed, already moving toward the turbolift. Mr. Worf, coordinate with Mr. Winner. I want real-time tactical data on that transport's structural integrity. Picard's voice carried the weight of command authority accepting terrible responsibility. Dr. Crusher, prepare sickbay for 17 patients with vacuum exposure injuries. Mr. Data, calculate optimal retrieval sequences to minimize the survivor's time in hard vacuum. Carter ran through Enterprise's corridors with purpose born from countless mobile suit deployments. In the cargo bay, Sandrock waited. His partner, his weapon, his means of imposing his will on an uncaring universe. He sealed himself into his pilot's suit, the familiar weight of the helmet settling into place as neural interfaces activated. The cockpit embraced him like a second skin, displays flaring to life with system status and tactical overlays. Through Sandrock's sensors, he could see the fragmenting transport, could feel the desperate fear radiating from the trapped survivors. His space heart reached toward them, offering silent reassurance that help was coming. Sandrock, full combat activation, Carter commanded. All systems online. We're going to save them. The mobile suit's mono-eye blazed to life, and Carter felt the familiar rush of human and machine becoming one unified instrument of purpose. The cargo bay's atmospheric force field shimmered as Sandrock moved forward, stepping out into the void of space with the casual confidence of a warrior entering his natural element. Enterprise, this is Winner. Beginning rescue operation. On the bridge, Picard watched the main view screen where Sandrock appeared as a golden giant against the stars, already accelerating toward the dying transport with precisely controlled thruster bursts. Mr. Data, talk him through the structural weak points. Data's fingers flew across his console, transmitting real-time data directly to Sandrock's systems. Mr. Winner, the forward cargo section contains 7 survivors. Hull integrity at 42% and degrading. The breach in Section 3 has expanded. Recommend approach vector 27 Mark 5 to avoid plasma venting. Carter adjusted his approach, Sandrock's thrusters firing in minute corrections that brought the mobile suit alongside the transport's shattered hull. Through his sensors, he could see the survivors huddled in a cargo compartment, their faces pressed against an observation port, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and desperate hope as the giant machine appeared beside their dying ship. Sandrock's manipulator hand, designed to wield heat shotels in combat but capable of extraordinary precision, reached toward the hull. Carter's fingers moved across his controls with surgical delicacy, calculating exactly how much force the weakened structure could withstand. The mobile suit's fingers punched through the compromised hull plating, peeling it back like opening a tin can. Atmosphere vented an explosive rush that sent debris spinning into space. The 7 survivors screamed silently as vacuum claimed their compartment, their bodies immediately subjected to the brutal physics of decompression. Carter didn't hesitate. Sandrock's hand swept into the compartment, gathering the tumbling figures with desperate gentleness. A mother clutching 2 children. An elderly man. 3 younger adults. 7 people whose lives now depended on speed and precision. First group acquired. Carter transmitted, his voice tight with concentration. Returning to Enterprise. 30 seconds. Sandrock's thrusters fired at maximum burn, the mobile suit crossing the distance to the Enterprise in a blur of motion that pushed the Gundam's maneuvering systems to their limits. The cargo bay yawned open, and Sandrock's hand extended through the force field, depositing the survivors onto the deck where medical teams waited with emergency oxygen and resuscitation equipment. Group 1 delivered, Quatre reported, not waiting for acknowledgement before spinning Sandrock around and accelerating back toward the transport. Moving to second group. 9 survivors in the aft engineering section. Mr. Winner, hull stress in that section is critical, Data warned. The structure could collapse at any moment. Understood, Quatre replied, but he didn't slow down. Through his empathic connection, he could feel those 9 people. Their terror, their fading hope, their desperate prayers for salvation. Time measured in heartbeats, in the diminishing oxygen of failing life support, and the inexorable mathematics of structural failure. Sandrock dove toward the aft section, maneuvering through a debris field of shattered hull plates and venting plasma with the practiced ease of a pilot who had navigated mobile suit combat in asteroid fields and orbital debris clouds. The mobile suit's mono eye scanned the structure, identifying the survivor's exact location. This time, Quatre used a different approach. Instead of tearing through the hull, Sandrock's hand punched directly into an already compromised airlock, using the existing breach point to minimize additional structural stress. The airlock exploded outward under the impact, and 9 more people tumbled into vacuum. Quatre's heart clenched as he felt their panic, their oxygen-starved confusion. A young woman's consciousness was already fading. An engineering officer fought to remain aware despite the hypoxia clawing at his mind. Sandrock's hands moved like a concert pianist's, gathering the fragile human forms with impossible gentleness. Second group acquired. 23 seconds to Enterprise. But as Sandrock turned, Data's voice carried urgent warning. Mr. Winner, the transport's reactor containment is failing. You have approximately 90 seconds before catastrophic detonation. And there was still one more group. The final survivor, a single person trapped in the bridge section, cut off by collapsed bulkheads and failing power systems. Through his empathic senses, Quatre felt her determination, her refusal to abandon her ship even as it died around her. The captain? She had stayed behind to coordinate the evacuation, to ensure her passengers and crew reached the escape pods. Now she would die for that nobility unless Quatre could reach her in time. Depositing second group. Quatre transmitted as Sandrock's hands gently placed the 9 survivors onto the Enterprise's cargo bay deck. Medical teams swarmed over them immediately, but Quatre was already turning back. Going for the captain. 72 seconds to detonation. Mr. Winner, abort! Picard commanded. 16 lives saved is better than 17 casualties including yourself. Not acceptable, Captain, Quatre replied, and there was something in his voice that transcended mere disobedience, an absolute conviction that some calculations couldn't be reduced to mathematics and acceptable losses. I can feel her. She's still fighting. I won't abandon her. Sandrock accelerated to combat speeds, thrusters pushing beyond recommended operational parameters, heat warnings flashing across Quatre's displays. The mobile suit closed on the transport's bridge section just as another section of hull tore away in a shower of debris and escaping atmosphere. 45 seconds, Data reported, his synthetic voice somehow conveying urgency despite its mechanical precision. Sandrock's fist crashed through the bridge viewport. Reinforced transparent aluminum that would have resisted phaser fire but couldn't withstand the focused impact of Gundanium alloy driven by fusion-powered servomotors. The captain. A middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too many hard choices, tumbled toward the breach, her magnetic boots losing their grip on the deck. Sandrock's hand caught her with the gentleness of a parent cradling an infant, fingers curling protectively around her fragile form. 28 seconds to detonation, Data announced. I've got her! Quatre shouted, spinning Sandrock around and firing every thruster at maximum burn. The mobile suit rocketed away from the transport, G-forces that would have pulped an unprotected human barely registering through the Gundam's inertial dampening systems. 15 seconds. The Enterprise loomed ahead, cargo bay open like welcoming arms. Sandrock dove through the atmospheric force field, Cotter's hand extending to deposit the captain onto the deck where Dr. Crusher herself waited with a medical team. 5 seconds. 4. 3. The cargo bay force field sealed. Sandrock dropped to one knee inside the bay, the mobile suit's reactor venting excess heat in visible waves. And through the bay's observation ports, the crew watched as the Meridian's Hope's reactor containment failed catastrophically, the transport vanishing in a sphere of expanding plasma and debris. Cotter sat in Sandrock's cockpit, hands trembling, heart hammering, empathic senses flooded with the complex emotional signatures of 17 people who had been seconds from death, and were now flooding sickbay with relief and shock and the overwhelming gratitude of impossible salvation. He had saved them. All of them. Not with diplomacy or careful negotiation or measured application of force, but with absolute commitment, and the willingness to risk everything on the faith that sometimes, the right choice was the one that made mathematics surrender to moral imperative. In sickbay, Dr. Beverly Crusher worked with practiced efficiency, treating vacuum exposure injuries while her medical staff stabilized patients. The captain of the Meridian's Hope, identified as Captain Sarah Mendez, coughed as oxygen flooded her lungs, her eyes focusing with difficulty as awareness returned. "The others?" she rasped. "My crew? My passengers?" "All 17 accounted for and receiving treatment," Crusher assured her. "You're safe now. Thanks to a very determined young pilot." On the bridge, Picard stood motionless, staring at the tactical display that showed the debris field where the transport had been. Beside him, Riker whistled softly. 16 lives in less than 3 minutes, the first officer murmured. "I've never seen anything like it." "Nor have I," Picard admitted quietly. And in his voice was a complex mixture of relief, concern, and the recognition that Quatre Raberba Winner had just demonstrated something both magnificent and terrifying. The capacity to succeed where Starfleet's finest technology and training had failed, through nothing more than courage and an obsolete concept called a warrior's honor. The Romulan warbird decloaked 3 light-years from the Enterprise's position, its presence detected immediately by the ship's long-range sensors. Commander Tomalak's face appeared on the view screen with the practiced superiority that characterized Romulan military officers who had survived decades of intrigue and conflict. "Captain Picard," Tomalak said, his tone carrying false cordiality. "How fortuitous to encounter you in this sector. I trust your mission proceeds well?" Picard rose from his command chair, his expression neutral but alert. "Commander Tomalak, the Enterprise is conducting routine scientific surveys in Federation space. Unless you have legitimate business here, I must ask you to withdraw to your side of the neutral zone." "Scientific surveys," Tomalak repeated, and his smile suggested he knew something Picard didn't. "How curious. Our intelligence suggests your recent activities have been far more dramatic." "A confrontation with Ferengi merchants, a spectacular rescue involving technology unlike anything in the Federation arsenal. Tell me, Captain, have you been keeping secrets from the Romulan Star Empire?" On the bridge, Worf's hands moved to tactical controls, ready but not yet activating weapons. Cotter stood at his usual observation position, his empathic senses immediately detecting the undercurrents of menace beneath Tomalak's diplomatic facade. This wasn't a chance encounter. The Romulans had been searching for them. "The Enterprise's activities are a matter of Federation record, Commander," Picard replied evenly. "We violated no treaties and crossed no borders. Whatever intelligence you believe you possess is irrelevant to our current operations." "Perhaps," Tomalak conceded. "But I'm afraid I must insist on verification. We've detected unusual energy signatures in this region. Readings consistent with technology that could pose a security threat to Romulan interests. As is our right under Article 7 of the Treaty of Algerin, we're conducting our own investigation. Article 7 pertains to cloaking device technology and suspected violations of the Neutral Zone Agreement." Data interjected from his station. It does not grant the Romulan Empire authority to interrogate Starfleet vessels in Federation space. Tomalak's expression hardened slightly. Then perhaps we should discuss this matter through more direct channels. Captain Picard, I'm detecting a significant metallic mass in your cargo bay. Sensors suggest it's approximately 16 meters in height, and constructed of an unknown alloy that resists our scanning protocols. I'm quite curious to learn what the Federation is transporting in such secrecy. Cotter felt his heart rate accelerate. The Romulans knew about Sandrock. Someone had talked. Perhaps the Ferengi, selling intelligence to the highest bidder, or perhaps Romulan agents had intercepted Starfleet communications about his presence. Either way, the situation had just escalated from diplomatic posturing to direct threat. Commander Tomalak, Picard said carefully, the cargo you've detected is the property of a civilian refugee under Federation protection. It poses no threat to Romulan security and is therefore none of your concern. A civilian refugee with military hardware more advanced than anything in the known galaxy? Tomalak's skepticism was palpable. Captain, you're insulting my intelligence. Does either of us credit? The Romulan Senate has authorized me to investigate this matter thoroughly. You will permit a boarding party to inspect your cargo, or we will interpret your refusal as a hostile act. Riker stepped forward, his posture aggressive. That's a threat, Commander. One that violates a dozen interstellar protocols. Merely a statement of fact. Tomalak replied smoothly. The Romulan Star Empire has a vested interest in maintaining strategic parity with the Federation. When we detect technology that could upset that balance, we have both the right and the responsibility to investigate. Surely Captain Picard, with his legendary commitment to transparency and cooperation, would understand our position. Picard's jaw tightened. Tomalak was maneuvering him into a corner. Refuse the inspection and give the Romulans justification for escalation, or allow the inspection and expose Sandrock to direct Romulan observation and analysis. Cotter couldn't remain silent any longer. Captain, permission to speak? Picard glanced back, and something in his expression suggested he'd been expecting this. Granted. Cotter stepped forward, addressing Tomalak directly. Commander, I'm Quatre Raberba Winner, pilot of the mobile suit you've detected. The technology isn't Federation property. It's mine, from a universe beyond your reality's boundaries. I understand your concern about strategic balance, but threatening Captain Picard won't get you what you want. Tomalak's eyes narrowed with predatory interest. A universe beyond our reality. How fantastic. And this mobile suit, it's a weapons platform, I presume? It's a tool that can be used for combat or rescue, depending on the pilot's intentions. Cotter replied. Much like your warbird, Commander. The technology itself isn't inherently threatening. What matters is who controls it and for what purpose. A philosophical position I'm sure you find comforting, Tomalak said. But philosophy doesn't alter strategic realities. Captain Picard, you have 60 seconds to permit our boarding party access to your cargo bay, or I will interpret your refusal as confirmation that you're harboring weapons technology in violation of Federation Romulan treaties. Troy leaned close to Picard, her voice barely a whisper. Captain, he's bluffing about the treaty violations, but he's deadly serious about obtaining information on Sandrock. If we refuse, this could escalate to actual conflict. Picard's mind raced through tactical calculations and diplomatic possibilities. Allowing Romulan inspectors aboard the Enterprise was unconscionable. It would set precedents that would haunt Federation-Romulan relations for decades. But refusing might trigger a confrontation that could result in casualties and potentially a broader conflict. Commander Tomalak, Picard said slowly, I cannot permit a boarding party. However, in the interest of transparency and peaceful relations, I'm prepared to provide you with limited sensor data regarding the object you've detected. Will that satisfy your concerns? Sensor data can be falsified. Tomalak countered. Visual confirmation is required. Then I'll provide that. Cotter interjected. Everyone on the bridge turned to stare at him. Commander Tomalak, I'll deploy my mobile suit so your sensors can observe it directly. You'll get your visual confirmation, and Captain Picard won't have to violate his ship's security. Acceptable? Picard's expression flashed alarm. Mr. Winner, that's not. It's the only solution that doesn't result in either capitulation or conflict. Cotter said quietly, his empathic senses reading the captain's internal struggle. Captain, I appreciate your desire to protect me, but this is my responsibility. Sandrock's existence was already compromised by the rescue operations. Hiding now won't change that reality. Tomalak's smile widened with satisfaction. A reasonable proposal. Deploy your mobile suit, Mr. Winner. Allow my sensors a thorough scan. And perhaps we can avoid unnecessary unpleasantness. Cotter headed for the turbolift, but Picard's hand caught his shoulder. If this goes wrong, if Tomalak attempts to capture you or your mobile suit, you are authorized to defend yourself. But Mr. Winner, please don't start a war. I'll do my best, Captain, Cotter replied, and then he was gone, racing toward the cargo bay. Minutes later, Sandrock emerged from the Enterprise's shuttle bay, the mobile suit moving with careful, non-threatening precision into the open space between the two vessels. Cotter sat in his cockpit, acutely aware that Romulan sensors were analyzing every detail of his mobile suit's structure, cataloging weapon systems, attempting to penetrate the Gundanium alloy with scanning beams that scattered harmlessly across the superhard surface. Impressive. Tomalak's voice came through Sandrock's communication system. The whole composition alone represents a significant advancement over known materials. And those blade weapons, heat-based cutting implements, if I'm not mistaken. Quite elegant. You've had your visual confirmation, Commander, Cotter replied, keeping his voice neutral. Sandrock is a mobile suit from another universe, exactly as I stated. There's no conspiracy, no Federation plot to upset strategic balance. Just a refugee trying to survive in unfamiliar circumstances. A refugee with extraordinary power, Tomalak observed. Power that could be extremely valuable to the right allies. Tell me, Mr. Winner, have you considered that the Federation might not be the ideal protectors for someone in your unique situation? The Romulan Star Empire values strength and capability. We could offer you alternatives to Starfleet's restrictive oversight. The recruitment attempt was so transparent that Cotter almost laughed. You want to own me, Commander? The Ferengi wanted to buy my technology. Starfleet wants to study it. Everyone in this universe sees Sandrock as a strategic asset to be acquired or neutralized. But I'm not for sale, not available for hire, and not interested in becoming anyone's weapon. Noble sentiments, Tomalak replied. But nobility doesn't feed you, protect you, or provide you with resources to survive. The Romulan Empire could. His pitch was interrupted by a sudden alarm on both the Enterprise and Romulan warbird bridges. Worf's voice carried urgent warning. Captain, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures approaching at high warp. Configuration matches. Cardassian warships. 3 Gala-class cruisers, decloaking at the edge of sensor range. On Sandrock's display, Cotter watched as 3 aggressive-looking vessels materialized from warp, their weapons already charging. The lead ship's commander appeared on his communication screen. A Cardassian with the arrogant bearing of military authority accustomed to intimidation. Federation vessel, Romulan vessel, an unidentified combatant, the Cardassian commander announced. This sector has been claimed by the Cardassian Union under the terms of our expansion charter. You are all trespassing in Cardassian space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted to the nearest Cardassian outpost for processing. Picard's voice carried barely controlled fury. Gul Marate, this sector is well within established Federation territory. Your expansion charter has no legal authority here, and your presence constitutes an act of aggression. Your maps are outdated, Captain, Gul Marate replied with dismissive arrogance. The Cardassian Union has reassessed territorial boundaries based on more accurate stellar cartography. This region now falls under our jurisdiction. Comply immediately or face the consequences. Carter's empathic senses reeled as competing waves of hostility washed over him from 3 different sources. The Romulans calculating whether this presented an opportunity or a threat. The Cardassians radiating aggressive certainty in their manufactured claims. The Enterprise crew's combination of outrage and tactical assessment. And in the middle of it all, Gundam Sandrock. A single mobile suit facing down 5 warships representing 3 different interstellar powers, each with their own agendas and calculations. Captain Picard? Carter transmitted on a private channel. Permission to speak freely? Granted, Picard replied tersely, his attention divided between the Cardassian threat and the Romulan wildcard. This situation is about to escalate into combat, Carter said. The Cardassians are testing whether you'll defend your territorial claims. The Romulans are watching to see if they can exploit the conflict. And I'm the prize everyone's actually interested in. We need to change the tactical equation before someone decides to start shooting. Suggestions? Picard asked, and Carter could hear the captain's respect for tactical insight overriding his reluctance to rely on an unauthorized combatant. Let me talk to them, Carter proposed. Not as a Federation asset, not as Romulan property, not as Cardassian plunder. As an independent party who's extremely dangerous when provoked. Sometimes the best way to prevent a fight is to make everyone realize that winning would cost more than losing. Picard hesitated only a moment. Proceed. But Mr. Winner, de-escalation, not provocation. Carter opened a general communication channel, broadcasting to all 5 vessels simultaneously. This is Quatre Raberba Winner, pilot of Gundam Sandrock. I'm currently a guest aboard the Enterprise under Federation protection, but I'm not Federation property. I'm also not available for Romulan recruitment or Cardassian acquisition. To all parties listening, I've spent my entire life fighting wars started by people who thought they could impose their will through superior firepower. I'm extremely tired of it. He paused, letting that sink in, then continued with quiet intensity. Each of your vessels represents years of engineering, millions of units of currency, and hundreds of crew members. Sandrock represents 1 pilot, 1 mobile suit, and the absolute certainty that if forced to fight, I will inflict casualties disproportionate to what you're hoping to gain. Is territorial posturing really worth the cost of finding out what a Gundam can do when defending itself against multiple opponents? The communication channels fell silent. On the Enterprise bridge, Riker whistled softly. That's one way to negotiate. Gul Marate spoke first, his voice carrying cold calculation. You threaten the Cardassian Union? A single pilot against 3 warships? I'm not threatening anyone, Gul Marate, Carter replied. I'm simply pointing out that escalating this situation serves none of your actual interests. The Cardassians want to expand their territory. Starting a shooting war with the Federation over a disputed sector doesn't accomplish that goal. The Romulans want intelligence on my mobile suit. They've already scanned Sandrock extensively, so that objective is partially achieved. The Federation wants to continue their mission without incident. And I want to be left alone to figure out how to return to my own universe. Everyone gets something if we all just walk away. Carter concluded. Everyone loses something if we start fighting. Which outcome serves your empires better? The silence stretched, pregnant with the possibility of violence or wisdom. Carter's hands remained steady on Sandrock's controls, ready to deploy weapons if necessary but hoping desperately that he misjudged the situation. Finally, Tomalak spoke, and there was grudging respect in his voice. Well reasoned, Mr. Winner. The Romulan Empire has obtained the intelligence we sought. Captain Picard, we will withdraw to our side of the neutral zone. But I suspect this is not the last time we'll meet. The Romulan warbird's cloak shimmered back into place, and it vanished from sensors, retreating as promised. Gul Marate's expression showed barely contained frustration, but even Cardassian arrogance recognized futility when confronted with it. The Cardassian Union withdraws our territorial claim on this specific sector. For now. But be warned, Federation, our expansion will not be stopped by clever words and threatening postures. The 3 Gala-class cruisers turned in formation and jumped to warp, disappearing into the stellar distance. Quatre sat in Sandrock's cockpit, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His empathic senses detected the sudden relaxation of tension throughout the Enterprise, relief washing through the crew like a wave. "Mr. Winner." Picard's voice came through the comm, and for the first time since Quatre had met him, the captain sounded genuinely impressed. "That was either brilliant diplomacy or the most reckless bluff I've witnessed in 30 years of Starfleet service. Possibly both. In my experience, Captain, the line between brilliance and recklessness is usually determined by whether you survive the outcome," Quatre replied, guiding Sandrock back toward the Enterprise's shuttle bay. "Today we survived. That makes it brilliance." As the mobile suit settled back into the cargo bay and Quatre began shutdown procedures, he realized something fundamental had shifted. He had just negotiated a stand-down between 3 hostile powers not through superior firepower or strategic advantage, but through the simple recognition that everyone involved had more to lose than gain from conflict. It was the most Star Trek thing he'd done since arriving in this universe. And it felt surprisingly right. The celebration in 10 Forward that evening was subdued but genuine. Captain Mendez and several rescued crew members from the Meridian's Hope had remained aboard the Enterprise pending transport arrangements, and they insisted on expressing their gratitude properly. Guinan, the enigmatic bartender whose wisdom seemed to transcend her role, prepared drinks while crew members mingled with the rescued civilians in an atmosphere of cautious optimism. Quatre sat at the bar, nursing a fruit juice. He'd never developed a taste for alcohol, and watching the interactions with his empathic senses half engaged. The emotional landscape was complex. Gratitude from the rescued, curiosity from the Enterprise crew, and an undercurrent of unease about what the Romulan and Cardassian encounters meant for the future. "You look troubled," Guinan observed, her dark eyes seeing more than most people revealed. "Someone who just prevented a 3-way interstellar incident should look more pleased with himself." "I bought time, not peace," Quatre replied. "The Romulans know about Sandrock now. The Cardassians too. Word will spread to other powers, the Klingon, the Ferengi Alliance, probably intelligence organizations I don't even know exist yet. Every faction in this galaxy will be calculating whether I'm an opportunity or a threat." Guinan poured something amber into a glass and slid it across the bar. "Synthahol. Tastes like whiskey, won't impair your judgment. Try it." She waited while Quatre took a cautious sip, then continued. "You're right that you've attracted attention. But attention isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes being noticed is safer than trying to hide." "How do you figure that?" Quatre asked, genuinely curious. "When everyone knows about you, everyone watches everyone else watching you. Makes it harder for any single power to make a move without triggering responses from rivals." Guinan's smile was knowing. "You've made yourself into a piece on a game board that's too valuable to capture but too dangerous to ignore. That's a peculiar kind of safety." Before Quatre could respond, the doors to 10 Forward opened and Captain Picard entered, accompanied by a dignified older man in civilian clothes. The stranger's bearing suggested authority, and his eyes carried the weight of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected millions. Picard approached Quatre directly. "Mr. Winner, I'd like to introduce Admiral Alina Nechayev, Starfleet's Strategic Operations. She transported aboard an hour ago specifically to meet with you." Quatre stood immediately, recognizing command authority even in civilian dress. "Admiral." Nechayev studied him with an intensity that suggested she was cataloging everything about him: his posture, his expressions, the way his eyes tracked movement around the room. "Mr. Winner, I've read the reports, reviewed the sensor data, and consulted with Starfleet intelligence regarding your unique situation. I'm here to make you a formal offer." "Should we go somewhere more private?" Quatre asked, aware that the conversation was attracting attention from others in 10 Forward. "That won't be necessary," Nechayev replied. "What I'm about to propose isn't a secret, and transparency serves everyone's interests at this point." She gestured to a nearby table, and they sat. Picard, Nechayev, and Quatre forming a triangle while Guinan observed from the bar with knowing interest. Mr. Winner, Starfleet Command has authorized me to offer you a provisional commission as a Special Operations Consultant, rank equivalent to Lieutenant Commander, assigned to the USS Enterprise under Captain Picard's direct command. Nechayev spoke with the precision of someone delivering carefully prepared statements. The position would grant you legal standing within Starfleet, access to Federation resources, and autonomy in operating your mobile suit within established guidelines. In exchange for what? Quatre asked, his tactical instincts immediately seeking the cost hidden in seemingly generous terms. Information sharing regarding your mobile suit's capabilities. Not technical specifications that would allow replication, but operational parameters that would help Starfleet tactical officers coordinate with you during joint operations. Participation in defensive actions when the Enterprise faces threats beyond standard engagement protocols. And your agreement to refrain from independent military operations without command authorization. Nechayev's expression hardened slightly. To be clear, Mr. Winner, this isn't a request to join Starfleet's ranks in a traditional sense. We're not asking you to surrender your independence or your principles. We're offering a framework that allows you to operate within the Federation while maintaining your unique status. You'd be part of Starfleet, but not bound by all the regulations that govern standard officers. Quatre processed the offer, his empathic senses reading Nechayev's emotional signature. She was being honest. This was a genuine proposal, not a trap disguised as opportunity. But beneath the honesty was pragmatic calculation. Starfleet wanted him where they could see him, working within their structure rather than as an unpredictable variable. What happens if I refuse? Quatre asked. Then you remain a civilian refugee with increasingly limited options. Nechayev replied bluntly. The Romulans know about you. The Cardassians know about you. Within days, every major power in this quadrant will know about the mobile suit pilot with technology beyond current Federation capabilities. You'll become a target for recruitment, acquisition, or elimination. Starfleet protection will become increasingly difficult to justify if you're not officially part of our organization. So it's not really an offer, Quatre said quietly. It's a choice between accepting your terms or facing the consequences of being alone in a universe that sees me as either a weapon or a threat. Welcome to the realities of interstellar politics, Nechayev said, not unkindly. Mr. Winner, I understand this feels like coercion. But consider the alternative we could have pursued, detaining you under security protocols, confiscating your mobile suit as unregistered military hardware, restricting your movements until we determined you weren't a threat to Federation security. We chose not to pursue that path because Captain Picard vouched for your character, and because your actions have demonstrated that you share fundamental values with Starfleet's mission. Picard interjected, his tone measured. Admiral Nechayev is correct that Starfleet could have taken a much more restrictive approach. The fact that they're offering you autonomy and rank is significant. It represents trust, Mr. Winner, even if it also serves strategic interests. Quatre looked between them, then out the viewport where stars streaked past at warp speed. In his universe, the choice would have been simple. Refuse any attempt to control him, operate independently, rely on the Gundams and the Magwanac Corps for support. But here, he had no support network, no allies beyond the uncertain goodwill of people he'd known for less than a week. If I accept this commission, what happens to my search for a way home? Quatre asked. Will I be allowed to pursue research into dimensional physics, to investigate spatial anomalies that might create another gateway to my universe? Not only allowed but actively supported, Nechayev assured him. Starfleet science has significant interest in your arrival phenomenon. Understanding how you cross dimensional barriers could revolutionize our knowledge of quantum mechanics and spatial theory. You'd have access to our best physicists and most advanced research facilities. Your personal goal and Starfleet's scientific objectives align perfectly in this regard. It was a good answer, perhaps too good. But Quatre's empathic senses detected no deception, only the Admiral's genuine belief that the arrangement would benefit both parties. I need to discuss this with someone, Quatre said finally. May I have 24 hours to consider your offer? Nechayev glanced at Picard, who nodded subtle agreement. 24 hours, Mr. Winner. But understand that delay carries risks. Every hour that passes is another hour for other powers to formulate their own plans regarding you and your mobile suit. After the Admiral departed, Quatre remained at the table with Picard, the weight of the decision settling over him like a physical burden. You said you need to discuss this with someone, Picard observed. Who did you have in mind? Counselor Troy? Commander Data? Actually, Captain, I was hoping to speak with Sandrock, Quatre admitted. When Picard's eyebrow rose in surprise, Quatre explained. In my universe, the relationship between pilot and Gundam is more than mechanical. We train together, fight together, survive together. Sandrock has saved my life dozens of times, and I've pushed her beyond design limits more times than I can count. She's not sentient in the way Commander Data is, but there's a connection there that I can't easily explain. Picard's expression showed understanding rather than skepticism. I've known starship captains who spoke of their vessels as living beings. The bond between a commander and their ship can transcend mere machinery. If consulting with your mobile suit helps you make this decision, then by all means, take the time you need. Quatre found himself in the cargo bay an hour later, standing before Sandrock's imposing form. The mobile suit was powered down, systems in standby mode, but the Gundanium alloy seemed to glow softly in the bay's lighting. Quatre placed his hand against the foot assembly, feeling the cool metal beneath his palm. What do you think, Sandrock? He asked quietly. Do we join them? Become part of Starfleet, with all the restrictions and compromises that entails? Or do we refuse and take our chances as independents in a universe that's already proven it sees us as prizes to be claimed? The mobile suit, of course, offered no verbal response. But Quatre's empathic connection to the machine, forged through countless hours in the cockpit, through desperate battles and miraculous victories, provided something close to intuition. Sandrock had been built for a specific purpose. To fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, to be a shield for the weak and a sword against oppression. Starfleet's mission, exploration, protection, upholding principles of justice and peace, wasn't so different from what the Gundams had been created to achieve. The methods were different, certainly. The structure more rigid, the oversight more comprehensive. But the fundamental goal of making the universe safer and more just? That aligned with everything Quatre believed. You're thinking too hard about this. Quatre turned to find Counselor Troy entering the cargo bay, her expression gentle but direct. I felt your emotional turmoil from 2 decks away. Mind if I join you? Please. Quatre gestured, grateful for the company. Troy approached Sandrock, studying the mobile suit with evident fascination. She's beautiful, in a way. Dangerous, yes, but there's an elegance to the design that speaks to purpose beyond mere destruction. The scientists who designed the Gundams believed in creating weapons so powerful that war would become unthinkable, Quatre explained. The theory was that if both sides possessed absolute force, either would risk deployment. It was naive, of course. We've learned that overwhelming power doesn't prevent conflict, it just changes the scale of destruction. And yet you continue to pilot Sandrock, continue to wield that power, Troy observed. Why? Quatre considered the question carefully. Because power itself isn't evil. It's neutral, a tool that reflects the intentions of whoever wields it. Sandrock in my hands protects people. In someone else's hands, she could terrorize them. The responsibility isn't to surrender power but to ensure it serves the right purposes. Which brings us to Admiral Nechayev's offer, Troy said. You're afraid that joining Starfleet means surrendering control over how Sandrock is used. That you'll be ordered to employ her power in ways that conflict with your principles. Aren't you? Quatre challenged. Haven't there been times when Starfleet's orders conflicted with what you knew was right? Troy smiled sadly. More times than I care to count. But I've also learned that working within a system, even a flawed one, often accomplishes more than fighting against it from the outside. Starfleet isn't perfect, Quatre. We make mistakes, we compromise our ideals, we face impossible situations where every choice leads to someone suffering. But we also explore new worlds, establish peaceful first contacts, provide humanitarian aid, and defend civilizations that can't defend themselves. The good outweighs the bad, in the long run. And when it doesn't? Quatre asked. When Starfleet orders you to do something you know is wrong? Then I trust the people I serve with to listen when I raise objections. Captain Picard has violated Starfleet orders when he believed those orders contradicted fundamental principles. Commander Riker has challenged command decisions he considered unjust. Even Lieutenant Worf, despite his respect for hierarchy and authority, has stood up to superior officers when their commands conflicted with his honor. Troy's eyes met Quatre's directly. Joining Starfleet doesn't mean surrendering your conscience, Quatre. It means adding your voice to an organization that, at its best, values dissent and debate as paths to better decisions. Quatre turned back to Sandrock, his hand still resting against the mobile suit's armored foot. In my universe, I fought alongside 4 other Gundam pilots. We were all orphans, all trained from childhood to be perfect soldiers, all carrying trauma that shaped us into weapons as surely as our mobile suits. We trusted each other because we had no one else to trust. Here, I'd be trusting people I've known for less than a week with decisions that could determine whether I ever see my home again. Trust has to start somewhere, Troy replied gently. And from what I've observed, Captain Picard and this crew have earned more trust in 5 days than many people earn in years. They've protected you when they could have detained you. They've defended your autonomy when they could have demanded your technology. They've treated you as a person rather than an asset. Doesn't that count for something? It did. Quatre knew it did. His empathic senses had confirmed, over and over, that the people aboard the Enterprise were genuinely committed to principles they claimed to uphold. They weren't perfect, no one was, but they were trying to do the right thing in a complex, morally ambiguous universe. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could reasonably expect. If I accept this commission, Quatre said slowly, I want certain conditions. I want final authority over Sandrock's deployment in combat situations. I want the right to refuse orders I consider unjust. And I want a guarantee that Starfleet won't attempt to reverse engineer my mobile suit's technology without my explicit consent. Troy nodded. Those are reasonable conditions. I suspect Admiral Nechayev and Captain Picard would find them acceptable, particularly the last one. Starfleet has policies against appropriating technology from refugees or allies. Your concerns have precedent in Federation law. Quatre took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settling into certainty. Then I'll accept. I'll become a Starfleet officer, provisionally, under those conditions. Not because I think Starfleet is perfect, and not because I've surrendered my independence. But because isolated and alone, I'm vulnerable to forces I can't control. Working within your structure at least gives me agency in determining my fate. And it gives you access to resources that might help you find your way home. Troy added. Don't discount that motivation, Quatre. Wanting to return to your universe doesn't make you any less committed to helping people in this one while you're here. As they left the cargo bay together, Quatre glanced back at Sandrock one final time. The mobile suit stood silent and powerful, a warrior awaiting its next deployment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whether finding a way home or adapting to this strange new universe, Quatre would face them not as a refugee hiding in the shadows, but as an officer in an organization dedicated to principles he could respect, if not always agree with. It wasn't the path he'd expected when the dimensional rift had torn him from his universe. But it was a path forward, and after days of uncertainty and isolation, that was something worth accepting. The commissioning ceremony took place on the Enterprise's main bridge the following morning. It was a small affair, just the senior staff, Admiral Nechayev, and a few select crew members who had worked directly with Quatre during the rescue operations. Starfleet protocol typically required ceremonies to take place at starbases or academy facilities, but given the unusual circumstances, exceptions had been made. Quatre stood at attention in a brand new Starfleet uniform. Operations Gold with the provisional rank insignia of Lieutenant Commander on his collar. The uniform felt strange after years of wearing his pilot's suit, constrictive in ways that had nothing to do with physical fit. But Counselor Troy had helped him understand that uniforms served purposes beyond mere identification. They represented commitment to shared principles, visible declaration of allegiance to something larger than individual interests. Admiral Nechayev stood before him, holding a PADD containing the official commissioning documents. Her expression was formal but not unkind as she began the ceremony. Quatre Raberba Winner, you stand before us as a unique individual in Starfleet history, a visitor from beyond our reality who has demonstrated courage, compassion, and commitment to principles that align with the Federation's founding ideals. The commission we offer you today is provisional and unprecedented, reflecting both the extraordinary nature of your circumstances and Starfleet's recognition that rigid adherence to traditional protocols would poorly serve the situation we collectively face. She paused, allowing her words to resonate through the assembled witnesses. Picard stood to her right, his expression carrying approval and something that might have been paternal pride. Commander Riker watched with the calculating assessment of a first officer evaluating a new addition to his crew. Data observed with his characteristic curiosity, while Worf's stance radiated the cautious acceptance of a warrior recognizing another warrior's value. As a special operations consultant with the rank of Lieutenant Commander, you will serve aboard the USS Enterprise under the direct command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Your duties will include tactical consultation during crisis situations, operation of your mobile suit platform in defense of Federation interests and humanitarian objectives, and participation in research initiatives aimed at understanding the dimensional phenomena that brought you to our universe. Nechayev's eyes met Quatre's directly. You will also retain certain autonomies not typically granted to officers of your rank, as outlined in the attached conditions that you and Captain Picard negotiated. Those conditions had taken hours to finalize, with Quatre insisting on protections that would prevent Sandrock from being appropriated or himself from being deployed in ways that violated his conscience. Picard had supported most of his requests, recognizing that trying to force compliance from someone like Quatre would undermine the entire purpose of bringing him into Starfleet's structure. Do you, Quatre Raberba Winner, accept this commission and the responsibilities it entails, agreeing to uphold the principles of the United Federation of Planets and serve with honor, integrity, and dedication to the protection of sentient life? Quatre felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. In his universe, he had never sworn formal allegiance to any government or organization. The Gundam pilots operated as independent operatives, their loyalty directed toward abstract concepts of freedom and justice rather than specific institutions. This was different, a commitment not just to ideals but to the imperfect, compromised, bureaucratic reality of an actual governmental structure. But as his empathic senses swept across the assembled crew members, he felt something that gave him confidence in this choice. These people believed in what they were doing. They had dedicated their lives to exploration and protection despite knowing that the Federation's ideals were sometimes compromised by political realities and bureaucratic limitations. They served anyway, because imperfect progress was better than cynical withdrawal. I accept, Quatre said, his voice steady and clear. Nechayev extended her hand, and Quatre shook it firmly. Then by the authority vested in me by Starfleet Command, I hereby commission you as Lieutenant Commander Quatre Raberba Winner, Special Operations Consultant, assigned to the USS Enterprise. Congratulations, Commander. Welcome to Starfleet. The assembled crew applauded, a gesture of acceptance that made something in Quatre's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. He had been alone in this universe, adrift without purpose or place. Now he had both, even if they came wrapped in compromises and conditions. After the ceremony concluded and Admiral Nechayev prepared to transport back to her command ship, Picard invited Quatre to join him in the ready room for a private conversation. How are you feeling, Commander? Picard asked once they were alone, gesturing for Quatre to sit. Uncertain, Quatre admitted. Relieved, but also concerned that I've made a commitment I might not be able to honor. Captain, what happens if Starfleet orders me to do something I consider fundamentally wrong? Picard settled into his chair, steepling his fingers in his characteristic contemplative gesture. Then you will follow the same path I would follow in such circumstances. You will voice your objections clearly and forcefully. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. And if all of that fails, if you truly believe that following orders would violate your core principles, you will refuse and accept the consequences of that refusal. Even if it means court-martial? Quatre asked. Even then, Picard confirmed. I have disobeyed direct orders 3 times in my career, Commander Winner. Each time, I believe that following those orders would result in greater harm than the consequences of disobedience. In 2 cases, I was later vindicated and the orders were retroactively rescinded. In the 3rd, I faced formal censure and came very close to losing my command. His eyes held Cotter's with absolute sincerity. I would make the same choices again. The uniform grants us authority, but it doesn't grant us absolution from moral responsibility. You wear Starfleet gold now, but you remain Quatre Raberba Winner. The young man who risked his life to save strangers, who defied orders to prevent injustice, who possesses both tremendous power and the wisdom to wield it carefully. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the bridge. Commander Riker's voice carried tension. Captain, we're receiving a priority distress signal from the Federation colony on Doro V. They're under attack by an unknown force. Long-range sensors detect multiple vessels engaged in orbital bombardment. Civilian casualties are already significant. Picard was on his feet instantly, Cotter rising with him. Red alert. Set course for Doro V, maximum warp. Commander Winner, you're with me. They rushed onto the bridge, where tactical displays showed a grim situation. Doro V was a peaceful agricultural colony, population approximately 8,000, with minimal defensive capabilities. The attacking force consisted of 4 ships whose configuration suggested neither Romulan, Cardassian, nor any recognized design in Starfleet databases. Analysis, Mr. Data, Picard commanded as he took his seat. Data's fingers flew across his console. The attacking vessels appeared to be a coalition of independent raiders and mercenaries. Their weapons are a mixture of technologies from various civilizations, Klingon disruptors, Ferengi energy weapons, and what appears to be modified Cardassian targeting systems. They are conducting systematic orbital bombardment of population centers with what appears to be a deliberate intent to maximize civilian casualties. Why? Riker asked, bewildered. Doro V has no strategic value. They're farmers and artisans. What could raiders possibly gain from slaughtering them? Worf's voice carried grim understanding. Terror, Commander. Attacking a defenseless colony and escaping unpunished sends a message to other colonies. Pay protection money to mercenary groups or face the same fate. It's an old tactic, and an effective one if no one intervenes. Cotter felt his hands clench. This was exactly the kind of oppression he had fought against in his universe. Stronger forces preying on the weak, using violence to extract wealth and compliance, counting on the defenders of order to arrive too late to make a difference. Time to Doro V? Picard asked. 23 minutes at current speed, Data reported. Captain, Worf interjected. I'm detecting weapons signatures consistent with plasma torpedoes targeting a civilian shelter. Approximately 400 people are sheltering in that facility. Impact in 90 seconds. 23 minutes. They would arrive in time to drive off the raiders, to pursue them through the stars and perhaps eventually bring them to justice. But they would arrive far too late to save those 400 people, or the hundreds more who would die while the Enterprise closed the distance. Unless someone else intervened. Cotter stepped forward. Captain, permission to deploy immediately. Picard turned, his expression showing he had anticipated this request. Commander Winner, we're traveling at warp 9.4. Even if we drop to impulse to allow you to launch, the time lost would. Sandrock can be deployed from a warp-capable shuttle. Cotter interrupted. Load my mobile suit into a Type 6 shuttlecraft, accelerate the shuttle to maximum warp, drop it out of warp at the edge of the Doro V system, and I'll deploy from there. I can reach the colony and neutralize those torpedoes before they impact the shelter. Data's head tilted as he ran calculations. Theoretically feasible, Captain. A Type 6 shuttle could maintain Warp 9 for the distance required, though the structural stress would likely render the shuttle inoperable after deployment. Commander Winner would need to use his mobile suit's own propulsion to reach the colony from the drop point, approximately 45,000 kilometers at maximum thrust. Cutting it extremely close. Riker observed. If anything goes wrong during deployment, if Sandrock systems don't activate immediately, those people die. They die anyway if we don't try, Cotter replied, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had made impossible calculations in the heat of battle dozens of times before. Captain, this is exactly why you commissioned me. I'm the tactical asset that can respond to situations where normal Starfleet capabilities aren't sufficient. Let me do my job. Picard held his gaze for a long moment, and Cotter's empathic senses detected the captain's internal struggle. The desire to protect his newest officer warring with the recognition that hundreds of lives hung in the balance. Make it so, Picard decided. Mr. LaForge, prepare Shuttle Bay 2 for immediate launch. Mr. Winner, you have 3 minutes to get your mobile suit loaded and ready for deployment. Cotter was already moving, racing toward the turbolift with the practiced efficiency of a Gundam pilot who had launched into desperate situations more times than he could count. As the doors closed, he caught a final glimpse of the bridge crew, professionals preparing to follow an unconventional officer into an unconventional battle. In the shuttle bay, Chief O'Brien and Commander LaForge worked with frantic precision, using tractor beams to maneuver Sandrock into the shuttle's cargo area. The mobile suit barely fit, Gundanium armor scraping against the shuttle's interior framework. This is insane, LaForge muttered as he worked the controls. We're essentially turning a shuttlecraft into a disposable delivery system for a war machine. Welcome to my universe, Cotter replied, already sealing himself into his pilot's suit. Where insane tactical decisions are just another Tuesday. He climbed into Sandrock's cockpit, the familiar embrace of the pilot's seat settling around him as systems activated. The neural interface helmet locked into place, and suddenly he wasn't just sitting in a shuttlecraft. He was Sandrock, feeling the shuttle's engines through the mobile suit's sensor suite, calculating trajectories and attack vectors with the precision of someone who had turned desperate mathematics into an art form. Shuttle is ready for launch, O'Brien reported to the bridge. Launch when ready, Picard commanded. Godspeed, Commander Winner. The shuttle bay doors opened to reveal the distorted starfield of high warp velocity. The Type 6 shuttle's engines screamed to life, accelerating to Warp 9 as it shot out of the Enterprise's shuttle bay like a missile. Inside, Sandrock stood locked in place by magnetic clamps, the mobile suit's systems counting down the seconds until deployment. Cotter's hands moved across his controls, pre-programming combat sequences while monitoring the shuttle's trajectory. 60 seconds to drop point. 45,000 kilometers from drop point to Doro V's orbital space. Plasma torpedoes would impact the civilian shelter in 87 seconds from now. Reaching drop point in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Dropping to normal space. The shuttle lurched violently as it decelerated from warp, structural integrity fields straining against forces they were never designed to handle. Warning klaxons shrieked as hull breaches appeared, atmosphere venting into space. Deploying now! Cotter commanded, and the shuttle's cargo bay explosively decompressed, magnetic clamps releasing Sandrock into the void. The Gundam's thrusters ignited at full power, acceleration pressing Cotter back into his seat despite the inertial dampening. On his heads-up display, tactical overlays showed the plasma torpedoes arcing toward Doro V, already entering the atmosphere, seconds from impact. Sandrock wasn't going to make it. The mobile suit was fast, impossibly fast by this universe's standards, but the mathematics were merciless. 41 seconds to intercept position. 38 seconds until torpedo impact. He was going to fail. Those 400 people were going to die because he couldn't cross 45,000 kilometers in time. Unless... Cotter's hand moved to a control he had never activated in combat before. The emergency thruster override, a system that would push Sandrock's fusion reactor to 120% capacity, generating thrust that could close the distance but would almost certainly damage the mobile suit's propulsion systems beyond field repair. "I'm sorry, Sandrock," he whispered, and activated the override. The Gundam screamed forward with acceleration that would have liquefied an unprotected human. G-forces crashed into Cotter despite the dampening systems, his vision tunneling, blood vessels in his eyes threatening to burst. But his hands remained steady on the controls, guiding Sandrock through the final seconds of flight. The plasma torpedoes were visible now, 6 bright points of destructive energy streaking through Doral V's atmosphere toward the civilian shelter. Sandrock's targeting systems locked on, calculating intercept vectors. Heat shotels wouldn't work, they required direct contact. Machine guns were depleted. Shoulder missiles could work if he had time to target and fire, but there were 6 torpedoes and he had perhaps 2 seconds. So Cotter did what any Gundam pilot would do when faced with impossible odds and no viable weapons: he used the mobile suit itself. Sandrock's armored body interposed itself between the torpedoes and their target, the Gundam's heat-resistant plating designed to withstand temperatures that would vaporize conventional metals. The first torpedo impacted Sandrock's chest armor with a plasma detonation that sent the mobile suit spinning. The second and third struck the left arm and leg, energy washing over Gundanium alloy and dissipating in brilliant cascades. The fourth, fifth, and sixth torpedoes Cotter intercepted with more precision, using Sandrock's remaining functional limbs to physically bat them away from their trajectory, sending them spiraling harmlessly into uninhabited terrain. Then Sandrock was falling, thrusters damaged by the emergency burn, control systems scrambled by plasma impacts. The mobile suit plummeted through Doral V's atmosphere, armor glowing cherry red from atmospheric friction. Cotter fought for control, trying to restart damaged thrusters, but Sandrock was responding sluggishly. The ground rushed up to meet him, fields and forests, and a river that might cushion the impact if he could just angle his descent correctly. "Come on, Sandrock," he urged through gritted teeth. "We've survived worse than this. Don't fail me now." One thruster sputtered to life. Then another. Not enough to stop the fall, but enough to slow it, to turn a catastrophic impact into merely devastating. Sandrock hit the river at an angle, water exploding upward in a geyser as 16.5 meters of Gundanium alloy and damaged mobile suit plowed through the current, and embedded itself in the riverbank. In his cockpit, Cotter hung in his pilot's harness, every bone in his body aching from the impact forces. Warning lights flashed across every display: thruster damage, power coupling failures, sensor array offline. But he was alive. And more importantly, 400 civilians were alive. His communicator crackled with static, then resolved into Captain Picard's voice. "Commander Winner, respond. Cotter, are you all right?" Cotter's hand trembled as he reached for the communication controls. "I'm alive, Captain. Sandrock is damaged but functional. The torpedoes were neutralized. How are the colonists?" "Safe, thanks to you," Picard replied, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "The Enterprise has arrived in orbit and is engaging the raider vessels. They're already retreating. Your intervention apparently convinced them this colony is more trouble than it's worth. Medical teams are preparing to transport to your location." "Negative on medical transport," Cotter said, already beginning damage assessment protocols. "I need an engineering team and Law Forge if he can spare the time. Sandrock took significant damage. I won't be able to fly her out of this position without repairs." As he spoke, Cotter became aware of movement outside the cockpit. Through Sandrock's remaining functional sensors, he detected dozens of people approaching, colonists emerging from the shelter he had protected, their faces turned upward toward the golden giant that had fallen from the sky to save them. Their emotional signatures washed over him through his empathic connection. Gratitude so profound it brought tears to his eyes, wonder at the impossible machine that had shielded them from death, and something else. Recognition. Understanding that someone had cared enough about their lives to risk everything to preserve them. This, Quatre realized, was why he had become a Gundam pilot. Not for the glory of combat, or the strategic advantages of superior firepower, but for moments like this, when power used righteously meant that people who should have died got to live, got to return to their families, got to wake up tomorrow and continue the simple, precious business of existing. "Welcome to Starfleet, Commander Winner." Picard's voice came through the communicator, carrying warmth and approval. "I suspect this is the first of many unconventional rescues we'll undertake together." Quatre smiled despite the pain in his bruised body, despite the damaged mobile suit that would require days of repairs, despite everything. "I look forward to it, Captain," he replied, and meant every word. The repairs to Gundam Sandrock took 6 days. Commander LaForge and his engineering team worked alongside Quatre in the makeshift repair facility the colonists of Doro-V had provided, a large agricultural warehouse hastily converted into a mobile suit maintenance bay. The damage was extensive. Thruster assemblies melted from the emergency burn, armor plating scorched and cracked from plasma impacts, sensor arrays scrambled by electromagnetic pulses, and power couplings throughout the mobile suit's frame stressed beyond normal operational parameters. "This is remarkable alloy work," LaForge said on the third day, his visor scanning a section of damaged chest armor. "The plasma should have penetrated here, but the Gundanium dispersed the heat across a wider surface area. It's like the molecular structure itself is designed to redistribute energy rather than absorb it in concentrated points." Quatre nodded, his hands deep in Sandrock's left leg assembly, reconnecting severed power conduits. Gundanium was developed specifically to counter beam weapons and high-energy attacks. The scientists who created it understood that in modern warfare, armor thickness matters less than energy distribution properties. "We could learn a lot from this material," LaForge mused, then quickly added, "Not that I'm suggesting we try to replicate it without your permission. I'm just saying, theoretically, if Starfleet could develop something similar, it could save a lot of lives." It was a conversation they'd had several times over the past days, LaForge's engineering curiosity warring with his respect for Quatre's boundaries regarding Sandrock's technology. Each time, Quatre appreciated that the chief engineer asked rather than simply taking sensor readings and cataloging data for later analysis. "Maybe someday," Quatre replied carefully. "When I'd better understand the political implications of introducing Gundanium to this universe. Right now, I'm more concerned with getting Sandrock operational again. The thruster damage is worse than I initially assessed." Outside the warehouse, life on Doro-V had returned to something approaching normalcy. The Raider attack had killed 37 colonists before the Enterprise arrived, a tragic number, but far fewer than the hundreds who would have died without Quatre's intervention. The colony had held a memorial service 2 days after the battle, and Quatre had attended in his Starfleet uniform, standing silently while colonists mourned their dead and celebrated their survival. Captain Mendez from the Meridian's Hope had also attended, along with several of the people Quatre had rescued. The growing collection of individuals whose lives he had saved created an unexpected support network. People who understood that his presence in this universe, however disruptive to political calculations and strategic balances, represented something fundamentally good. On the evening of the 6th day, as the repairs neared completion, Quatre stood outside the warehouse watching Doro-V's sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and purple. The agricultural fields stretched to the horizon, peaceful and productive, maintained by people who had nearly lost everything. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Counselor Troy's voice came from behind him. She had transported down from the Enterprise that afternoon to check on his emotional state, a gesture Quatre appreciated even if he found the concept of mandatory counseling somewhat invasive. "Very different from the L4 colonies," Quatre replied. "We had viewing ports and observation decks, but it was always space beyond them. Stars and darkness. This, earth and sky and growing things, feels more real somehow. You miss your home, Troy observed, joining him to watch the sunset. Every day, Quatre admitted. I wonder if the other pilots are still fighting, if Operation Meteor succeeded or failed, if the colonies achieved independence or if Earth crushed the rebellion. I wonder if they think I'm dead, or if they're searching for me. Sometimes at night I reach out with my empathic abilities as far as I can, hoping to feel something familiar. But there's nothing. Just the emotional signatures of this universe's inhabitants. That must be incredibly isolating, Troy said gently. To have an ability that connected you to your world, only to have it become a constant reminder of how far you are from home. It's also what keeps me grounded, Quatre countered. Feeling the colonists' gratitude, sensing Captain Picard's genuine commitment to his principles, detecting the Enterprise crew's camaraderie, it reminds me that even though this isn't my universe, it's still worth protecting. The people here aren't abstractions or political calculations. They're real, they suffer, they hope, they deserve someone fighting for them. Their conversation was interrupted by Commander Data's voice from Quatre's comm badge. Commander Winner, I believe you will want to see this. I have detected an unusual subspace anomaly approximately 2 light-years from our current position. The energy signature bears similarities to the phenomenon that brought you to our universe. Quatre's heart rate accelerated instantly. I'm on my way. Transport me directly to the Enterprise. Moments later, he materialized on the Enterprise bridge, still wearing his grease-stained work clothes rather than his uniform. Captain Picard stood before the main view screen, which displayed a swirling vortex of subspace energy that looked hauntingly familiar. Mr. Data, analysis, Picard commanded. The anomaly is a subspace inversion similar to the one that deposited Commander Winner in our universe, though smaller in scale and less stable. It is emitting exotic particles consistent with dimensional intersection points. The phenomenon is degrading rapidly. I estimate it will collapse completely within 72 hours. Can you determine where it leads? Quatre asked, moving to stand beside Picard. Unknown, Data replied. The dimensional signature is inconsistent with our universe's quantum baseline, suggesting it does connect to an alternate reality. However, I cannot confirm whether it connects to your specific universe or to one of the theoretically infinite parallel dimensions that quantum mechanics predicts. Quatre felt hope and fear warring in his chest. This could be his way home, the gateway back to his universe, to the other Gundam pilots, to the mission he had been torn away from. Or it could be a passage to somewhere even stranger, a one-way journey into an unknown reality where he would be even more lost than he was here. Commander Winner, Picard said quietly, I know what you're thinking. And I want you to understand that if you choose to attempt transit through that anomaly, Starfleet will not stop you. You came to us as a refugee, and refugees have the right to return home if such opportunity presents itself. Even though I'm now a Starfleet officer? Quatre asked. Your commission was always provisional, predicated on circumstances beyond your control, Picard replied. If those circumstances change, if you can go home, then your obligation to Starfleet is superseded by your right to self-determination. Riker stepped forward, his expression serious. But Quatre, you need to understand the risks. We have no way to verify where that anomaly leads. You could step through and find yourself in your universe, or you could end up somewhere completely different. And once you transit, there may be no way back. The anomaly is unstable. It could collapse the moment you pass through, leaving you stranded wherever you end up. Essentially, Data added, you would be gambling your current situation, difficult but stable, against the possibility of returning home or the risk of ending up somewhere worse. The mathematics of the decision are challenging. Quatre looked at the swirling vortex on the view screen, and his empathic senses reached toward it, trying to feel what lay beyond. But dimensional barriers blocked even his abilities. He could sense nothing from the other side, no familiar emotional signatures that would confirm his universe waited beyond that gateway. 72 hours, he said quietly. 3 days to decide whether to leave everything I built here and risk everything on a chance of going home. We can provide you with supplies, equipment, anything that might help you survive if you do transit to an unknown location," Picard offered. "And if you choose to remain, that choice will be equally respected. You've proven yourself valuable to Starfleet and to the Federation. We would be fortunate to have you continue serving with us." Over the next 3 days, Quatre wrestled with the most difficult decision of his life. He completed Sandrock's repairs, the mobile suit restored to full operational capacity. He spoke with Counselor Troy about the psychological implications of choosing safety over the unknown. He consulted with Commander Data about the quantum mechanics of dimensional travel. He meditated in the manner the Magwanac Corps had taught him, seeking clarity and stillness. And he felt the emotional signatures of the people around him. Captain Picard's respect and genuine affection for the young pilot who had challenged his assumptions about power and principles. Commander Riker's growing friendship, founded on mutual recognition of leadership burdens. Deanna Troy's empathic connection, the first person in this universe who truly understood what it meant to feel others' emotions. Data's intellectual curiosity, and the android's unusual perspective on what it meant to belong. Geordi LaForge's engineering camaraderie. Even Worf's grudging warrior's respect. On the final day, as the anomaly began its terminal collapse, Quatre stood in the cargo bay beside Sandrock. The mobile suit was ready for deployment, ready to carry him through the gateway if he chose. All he had to do was climb into the cockpit, launch into space, and accelerate toward the vortex before it disappeared forever. "You're not going, are you?" Captain Mendez's voice came from the cargo bay entrance. She approached slowly, her expression understanding. "I can see it in how you're standing. You've already decided to stay." Quatre smiled sadly. "Is it that obvious?" "To someone who's made similar choices, yes," she replied. "I was offered a promotion once, a chance to command a deep space explorer instead of a civilian transport. Better pay, more prestige, excitement, and discovery. I turned it down because the transport route I was running served colonies that depended on regular supply deliveries. Walking away would have meant those colonies suffered while Starfleet trained a replacement. You chose responsibility over opportunity," Quatre observed. "And you're doing the same," Mendez said. "You've built relationships here, taken on obligations to Starfleet and to the people you've saved. Walking away from that for a chance at going home, it's not who you are. You're the person who risks everything to save strangers. You can't walk away from strangers who have become friends." She was right, of course. Quatre had known the decision for days but hadn't wanted to admit it to himself. The other Gundam pilots would continue fighting without him. They were trained to operate independently, to adapt to changing circumstances. Operation Meteor would succeed or fail based on factors beyond his control. His universe would continue whether he was there or not. But here, in this universe, he had found something unexpected. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something new and valuable in its own right. A crew that respected him. A captain who challenged him to grow beyond his training as a weapon. An organization that, for all its flaws, genuinely tried to make the galaxy better. And a mobile suit that could serve purposes beyond war, rescue, protection, hope. Quatre's commage chirped. "Commander Winner, the anomaly will collapse in 30 minutes, Data reported. If you intend to attempt transit, you must deploy immediately." Quatre took a deep breath, placed his hand against Sandrock's armored foot one final time, and made his decision. "Negative, Commander Data. I'm not going through. Let the anomaly collapse. This is my universe now." Captain's log, stardate 47,821.4. The subspace anomaly has collapsed without incident. Commander Winner has chosen to remain with the Enterprise, a decision I believe demonstrates remarkable maturity and understanding of the responsibilities that come with power. His integration into the crew proceeds well, though I suspect the young officer will continue to challenge our assumptions and protocols in ways that are both frustrating and valuable. Picard sat in his ready room, reviewing the log entry, when his door chimed. "Come!" Quatre entered, now in proper uniform, his appearance that of a Starfleet officer rather than a refugee or guerrilla fighter. But his eyes still carried the weight of someone who had seen too much combat, made too many impossible choices, sacrificed too much for principles others took for granted. "Captain, I wanted to thank you," Quatre said, "for giving me the option to leave, for not making the decision easy. If you had tried to convince me to stay, I might have resented it. Letting me choose freely, that meant everything. Freedom of choice is fundamental to Federation principles," Picard replied. "Though I confess I'm relieved you chose to remain. You've become a valuable member of this crew, Commander Winner. And I believe your presence here serves purposes we haven't yet fully understood." "I hope so," Quatre said quietly. "Because I gave up my best chance of going home to stay. I need to believe that choice meant something. It meant you chose responsibility over desire, duty over comfort, the uncertain good you can accomplish here over the familiar struggles of your home universe," Picard said. "Those are the choices that define character, Commander. And they're the choices that make someone worthy of the uniform you wear." As Quatre left the ready room, Picard returned his attention to the stars visible through his viewport. The galaxy was vast and full of unknowns. Spatial anomalies, first contact scenarios, moral dilemmas that defied easy resolution. And now, among all those variables, was one 17-year-old Gundam pilot whose presence had already altered the political landscape of this region of space. The Romulans knew about Sandrock. The Cardassians had witnessed its capabilities. Word would spread to the Klingon Empire, to the Ferengi Alliance, to powers both known and unknown. Quatre Raberba Winner and his mobile suit had become factors in calculations spanning dozens of civilizations. But Picard had faith, in his crew, in Federation principles, and in the young officer who had demonstrated that power wielded with compassion could change outcomes in ways that conventional wisdom claimed were impossible. The Enterprise set course for its next mission, carrying aboard it a warrior from another universe who had learned to serve not through combat alone, but through the harder discipline of choosing when to fight and when to find alternatives. Quatre stood in his quarters that evening, looking out at the stars streaking past at warp speed. Somewhere beyond those stars, in a reality he could no longer reach, four other Gundam pilots continued their fight. Hero Yui with his ruthless efficiency. Duo Maxwell with his grim humor. Troa Barton with his silent competence. Chang Wufei with his rigid honor. They would think him dead, mourned but not forgotten, another casualty in the endless war for colonial independence. They would never know he had survived, had found a new universe, had chosen to stay when offered the chance to return. "I'm sorry," Quatre whispered to absent friends who would never hear him. "I hope you understand. I hope you win without me. I hope the colonies find the peace we fought for." Then he turned away from the viewport and toward the future, whatever that future held in a universe of exploration, discovery, and principles that demanded the best from those who served them. Gundam Sandrock waited in the cargo bay, a testament to conflicts this universe had never witnessed. But perhaps, in the hands of a pilot who fought for peace rather than victory, the mobile suit could become something more than a weapon of war. Perhaps it could become a symbol of what was possible when power served compassion, when strength protected the vulnerable, when a warrior chose not when to destroy but when to save. The Enterprise continued its journey through the stars, carrying aboard it one pilot and one mobile suit who had found purpose in a universe far from home. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. And in the darkness between stars, new challenges were already forming, new threats emerging that would test whether a Gundam pilot trained for war could truly adapt to a universe that demanded something more difficult than mere victory: wisdom, restraint, and the courage to believe that peace was worth fighting for, even when the path to peace was unclear. But that was a challenge for another day. Somewhere beyond those stars, in a reality he could no longer reach, four other Gundam pilots continued their fight. Hero Yui with his ruthless efficiency. Duo Maxwell with his grim humor. Troa Barton with his silent competence. Chan Wufei with his rigid honor. They would think him dead, mourned but not forgotten, another casualty in the endless war for colonial independence. They would never know he had survived, had found a new universe, had chosen to stay when offered the chance to return. "I'm sorry," Carter whispered to absent friends who would never hear him. "I hope you understand. I hope you win without me. I hope the colonies find the peace we fought for." Then he turned away from the viewport and toward the future, whatever that future held in a universe of exploration, discovery, and principles that demanded the best from those who served them. Gundam Sandrock waited in the cargo bay, a testament to conflicts this universe had never witnessed. But perhaps, in the hands of a pilot who fought for peace rather than victory, the mobile suit could become something more than a weapon of war. Perhaps it could become a symbol of what was possible when power served compassion, when strength protected the vulnerable, when a warrior chose not when to destroy but when to save. The Enterprise continued its journey through the stars, carrying aboard it one pilot and one mobile suit who had found purpose in a universe far from home. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. And in the darkness between stars, new challenges were already forming, new threats emerging that would test whether a Gundam pilot trained for war could truly adapt to a universe that demanded something more difficult than mere victory: wisdom, restraint, and the courage to believe that peace was worth fighting for, even when the path to peace was unclear. But that was a challenge for another day. For now, Quatre Raberba Winner, Gundam pilot, Starfleet officer, and empath navigating the complexities of human connection across dimensional boundaries, was exactly where he needed to be. Home. The integration of Gundam Sandrock and its pilot into the Star Trek universe proved that even the most incompatible elements, war machines designed for colonial rebellion and a starship dedicated to peaceful exploration, could find common ground when united by shared principles. Carter's journey from refugee to Starfleet officer reflected the Federation's highest ideals, that diversity, even diversity as extreme as visitors from alternate realities, strengthened rather than threatened the collective whole. Captain Picard's gamble in bringing Carter into Starfleet's structure rather than attempting to control or neutralize him established precedents that would influence Federation policy for years to come. Other refugees with extraordinary abilities would follow, each finding their own path within the organization that chose inclusion over isolation. The strategic implications of Sandrock's presence continued to ripple through galactic politics. The Romulans maintained covert surveillance, seeking opportunities to acquire the technology they had glimpsed. The Cardassians filed formal protests while privately assessing whether the mobile suit represented a threat to their expansion plans. Even the Borg Collective took notice, categorizing the unique fusion of pilot and machine as potential distinctiveness worthy of assimilation. But perhaps most significantly, Quatre Raberba Winner demonstrated that warriors trained for conflict could adapt to serve peace without surrendering the principles that made them warriors in the first place. His empathic abilities, once a curse that made every kill agonizing, became an asset that helped prevent conflicts before they escalated, saving lives through understanding rather than firepower. The question of whether he would ever return to his home universe remained unanswered. Spatial anomalies occurred with some regularity, and Federation science continued researching dimensional physics. Perhaps someday, another gateway would open, offering Carter a choice between the universe he had chosen and the universe that had created him. But until that day arrived, the Enterprise continued its mission of exploration and discovery, its crew strengthened by the addition of one unlikely officer who had learned that the greatest power wasn't the capacity to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary and when alternatives existed that honored both strength and compassion. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting stories.